Number 3. I'm a 22-year-old girl. I was looking on Craigslist to buy a couch for my new apartment a month ago. I found something I thought seemed like a good deal. From the pictures, the couch seemed to be in great shape. The seller wanted to be contacted by email. His email was mexicanpoppy666@hotmail.com. I felt that email was a bit off-putting, but I still went ahead and emailed the man my offer. He responded within 5 minutes, accepting the offer and asking for my address. I honestly felt uncomfortable with his asking. I did not want a stranger coming to my house. I suggested that I just come to his house to pick it up, but he continually insisted that he come to my house. Eventually I stopped responding, and a day later, he emailed me again, giving me his address. I didn't know if I should go at that point, but it seemed like a steal, almost too good to be true, and according to his address, he didn't live too far. So I got in my van and drove over to the seller's house. I immediately noticed that the house was a bit smaller than all the other houses on the block. When I rang the bell, a middle-aged man wearing a baseball cap answered the door. He gave me a huge smile and invited me in. I was immediately feeling uneasy. He led me into his living room, and I saw the couch. Immediately, I saw scuff marks and small tears in the couch. It was not at all in the shape that it appeared in the ad. I commented on this, and he just smiled and offered to lower the price. I told him I'm not interested, and here's where things started getting creepy. As I was making my way out of the house, he put his hand on my shoulder and offered to give it to me for free if I was willing to, quote-unquote, give something to him. I let out a disgusted gasp and got back into my car. I didn't even look up out the window. I just drove away from there quickly. But it doesn't end there. That same night, I was laying in my bed watching TV when I thought I heard somebody stomping up the steps of my porch. I muted the TV and was able to clearly hear the sound of somebody fiddling with my front doorknob. I jumped out of my bed and tiptoed over to the front door to look through the peephole, but whoever it was already gone. And then, I thought I could hear the sound of the gate to the backyard opening and closing. That was when I grabbed the phone and dialed 911. Soon after, I heard the sound of somebody fiddling with the doorknob to the back door of the apartment. I yelled to whoever it was that the police were on their way, and after that, I heard the sound of the gate opening and closing again. They were gone. This was a month ago and nothing has happened since, but I still can't sleep at night. I'm 99% sure it was the man that was selling the couch. He must have followed me home. There was no way it was just a coincidence. I don't plan on using Craigslist anymore, and I'm still trying to find a new apartment. Number 2. I was looking for a car to buy for my son for his 18th birthday. I was searching all the typical car websites, cars.com, eBay Motors. They were all overpriced as expected. Craigslist was the only place to find an actual deal. About a week into my search, I found an 03 Toyota Camry. It had 67,000 miles, no accidents, no damage, and good condition for only $3,500. This seemed like a steal for such a reliable car with such low mileage. The seller lived about 10 miles from me, which was a reasonable drive when looking for a car. I gave him a call to set up a time to come check it out. The man sounded normal on the phone. He assured me that there were absolutely no problems with the car. He introduced himself as Bob. I brought along $3,500 in cash, even though I planned on wiggling down the price as much as possible. I pulled up the dirt road to Bob's property about 15 minutes early. It was a tiny little house with a decent-sized property, only because it was a bit far from the nearest neighbors. The garage was open, so I walked over to see if anybody was inside, but except for an unusual amount of car parts, it was empty. The car was nowhere in sight. The only car on the property was an old pickup truck. I went over to the front door to check the house numbers. It was the right address. The doorbell button was missing, so I knocked on the front door. I knocked for exactly 5 minutes before deciding to give the man a call. So I dialed his number and I heard the sound of a cell phone ringing from inside the house. I was extremely confused at this point. Now I knew I had the right house. I didn't understand why, if he was home, why he wasn't answering. I decided I had to take a peek through one of the windows to see if anybody was inside. Peering through the glass, I couldn't really see much as it was pretty dark inside the house. I saw a very old-fashioned dining room set, but across from that, I saw somebody standing at the back door of the house, staring outside. I figured that must have been Bob, so I knocked on the window, but he didn't even move. There was no gate or anything to the backyard. It was just a wide open yard since this wasn't a rural area. I simply walked around the house to the backyard. I didn't understand how he couldn't hear me. When I got to the back door, I made a shocking realization. The figure standing by the door was a taxidermied human being. I ran straight back the way I came and back to my car. I looked up one last time before driving off. The blinds to the window I had peeked into had been shut, but I could see two of the blinds bent open. Somebody was at that window watching me. You can probably guess I had the gas pedal to the floor the whole way home. The whole situation still makes no sense. All the car parts, the fact that there was no Toyota Camry, the taxidermied human being. The fact that there was no car there leads me to believe that whoever that man wasn't planning on selling me anything. And that also leads to the disturbing thought that I was very close to becoming a lifeless statue staring out that man's back door. Number 1. I was looking to buy the iPhone 5 about a year ago. I found a guy on Craigslist who was selling his for $200. He claimed it was in mint condition and that he wanted to upgrade to the 5C. I didn't know much about how to go about testing a phone to make sure everything works, so I brought my little brother along who knew a lot more than I did. We met halfway at a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot at like 10 o'clock at night. Two large, intimidating guys stepped out of a black Honda Civic and walked over to us. One of the guys pulled out the phone and showed it to me. It didn't have a scratch on it. My brother took out my SIM card and popped it into this new phone. He did some testing and told me that it works. The guy then asked for $250, even though he originally asked for $200. I lied and told him I only brought $200, and he seemed a bit unhappy with this. I did have $250, but I didn't want to spend more than his original asking price. I kind of figured it was his way of making sure I didn't haggle down the price. I handed the guy the $200, and he and his buddy got back in their car. We got back into my car and I tested out the new phone by calling my girlfriend. I sat testing things around for about 5 minutes. My brother commented on the fact that the two guys hadn't left yet either, but I didn't really care. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. My brother then commented that the two guys started their car just as I had. I didn't find it too weird. I drove down the turnpike and eventually stopped at a red light. That's when I noticed the black Honda Civic pull up right behind us in my rear view mirror. I found that a bit weird since I was sure they came from the opposite direction. I continued my drive home, but every single turn we made, they followed, and close on my tail too. My brother suggested I pull over, but there was no way I was going to do that. I knew those guys were looking for trouble. It got to the point where I was trying to lose them and started driving dangerously. If they needed something, they would call or at least honk their horn, but they were looking for some kind of trouble. I tried something risky to lose them. At an intersection, the light had just turned red. I floored it across the intersection before any of the cars would begin to pass. My brother shouted at me, calling me stupid and crazy, but it worked. They didn't follow. We got home after the extra long drive. My heart was still racing from the intensity of the situation. I was just happy I got a working phone for such a low cost. Later that night, I was playing around with the phone trying to set some things up before going to bed. My parents and brother were already asleep at this point, and just then, the sound of 2 car doors slamming shut outside interrupted me. I looked out my window, and I felt like my heart completely stopped. The black Honda Civic was parked across the street. I could only assume the 2 guys were already halfway to our front door. I immediately woke up my dad and explained everything as quickly as possible. He got up, grabbed a baseball bat, and crouched behind the front door. A loud knock came at the front door. My dad screamed at them to go away. One of the guys on the other side of the door claimed to have a gun. and said that he would shoot the lock off of the door if he didn't open up. My dad told me to call Joe, our friend who lives 2 doors down who happens to be a police officer. I called Joe and he said he would be right over and to stay hidden. Here's the part that still scares me to this day. There was the sound of a silenced shot of a pistol. I peeked over and saw a bullet hole in the door, inches away from my dad's head. My dad ran away from the door and we all listened. We heard Joe outside yelling at them to drop their weapons. My dad went outside to help when they lowered their guns. Joe arrested the 2 assholes. I have to say, this was the scariest day of my life, but it was also the best I had ever felt in my entire life.
Halloween 2016. My 3 friends and I, who for the purpose of this story will be named J, K, and L respectively, were trick-or-treating downtown. Downtown was always a mob scene on Halloween only because the houses were so close together, meaning more candy for the amount walked. 10 o'clock was always the time things really started to die down, and by 10:30 we were really the only kids still out trick-or-treating. Only like 1 in 10 houses actually opened their doors this late, so we called it quits with the trick-or-treating and decided to just screw around. It was a Saturday night after all. As we called it quits with the trick-or-treating, a lone person in a clown costume was walking really, really slowly from the black fog in the distance. This was a legit clown costume too. The makeup was crazy. From the slit-mouth smile to the blood-filled boils, it was a scary costume. The 4 of us laughed and screamed in reaction, but ultimately walked away. We went to a park that was nearby to just goof around, make a mess with silly string and shaving cream and whatever. We weren't the first, however. Strands of silly string littered the playground, as well as shaving cream smudged on the walls of a bathroom building in the park to spell out obscenities. We all hung out on the playground, but Jay pointed out to the dark horizon where 2 clowns were walking over to us. One of them the same clown from earlier. I didn't think it was possible, but the second clown was even more disturbing than the first. The first clown now seemed to be wielding some kind of long, spear-like object. They both approached us really, really slowly. The funniness of the situation quickly wore off as they got closer and closer. Then they started to charge us. We all ran in different directions. One of the 2 clowns was chasing me. Out the park and down the street I ran. I didn't know the area too well, but I did know how to get back to Elle's house. I ran all the way there. About halfway there I lost the clown. I called Elle and told him I was in his backyard. He was out of breath, but he said he just lost one of the clowns and was on his way over now. I said I'd call Jay, and he said he'd call Kay. Luckily, Jay picked up on the first ring. He wasn't being chased, so he didn't sound as freaked out as Elle did. I told him to meet us at Elle's house. 10 minutes later, all 4 of us were in Elle's backyard, gathering our thoughts and discussing what just went down. We had a good laugh about it now that it was over as we ate some of the candies that we got. Kay went home, while me, Jay, and Elle hung out in the living room for a while. Lights off, TV on, playing some Xbox One party game. Jay looked out the window and then ducked, and told us to shh and turn off the TV. When we asked why, he said there was a clown out there. I didn't believe him, so I looked out the window. He screamed, "Don't," but it was too late. The clown standing outside of Elle's house looked right at me through the window. I shut the curtains and told Elle he wasn't lying. His parents weren't home, so going to his dad wasn't an option. Instead, we shut off the TV and went upstairs to Elle's bedroom. We looked out the window. The clown wasn't there anymore. Actually, we never saw either of the clowns again. But the next morning, Elle texted the three of us, saying he found a rubber clown nose on his backyard patio table. He said it was obviously placed there with intent to scare us, and mission accomplished because it worked. Luckily, that clown epidemic didn't last more than a month later. After that, it just became an old story. It was a school night Halloween. My mom and dad took my two twin brothers out trick-or-treating. I didn't have plans, so my parents kind of forced me to answer the door and hand out candies while they were gone. Since we live in a cul-de-sac on a dead-end street, we get next to no trick-or-treaters on Halloween, so every time the doorbell rang, I kind of jumped. I was in the living room watching TV, with the bucket of candies next to me on a small table. Butterfingers, the one and only candy my mom always got on Halloween for some reason. The doorbell rang, so I took the orange bucket and brought it to the door and opened it. There was someone in a scream mask and robe holding out a pillow sack. It didn't look like he got a lot of candy for the night, and given that the night was almost over and nobody was really coming to the house, and he was alone, which is always kind of sad, I gave him a bunch of candy. He walked away without saying thanks, which kind of made me feel bad, but it was honestly whatever. I stopped thinking about it as soon as I sat back down on the couch. The movie I was watching ended, so I started surfing the channels. During one of the brief moments of silence as the TV flipped from one channel to the other, I heard a thud and a bump come from downstairs near the back door. To better hear what it could have been, I turned the volume on the TV all the way down and went to the stairway. The back door was wide open. My heart started racing as I started to feel sick inside. I had forgotten to lock it when I went back there. The big question was if what I heard was the sound of the door opening or closing, and if someone was in the house. Naturally, I called down the stairway for my mom and dad, and then my twins' names. The silence from down in the dark den was creepy as hell. I was afraid to go down there. Unfortunately, there's no door to separate the main floor from the den stairway, so sitting in the living room suddenly didn't seem very comfortable. I kept the TV on, but muted. I just felt safer with the extra light it provided. It took a while for some reason, but it finally hit me to call my parents and ask them to come home. My mom said they'd be home within half an hour. I told my mom I was scared that someone was downstairs because I heard something. She assured me that there was nothing and it was just my imagination. I hung up the phone and immediately heard the sound of wood foundation cracking under one of the carpeted steps to the den. I froze on the couch. Literally, I couldn't move a muscle, not even a finger. Then there was another crack. As silently as I could, I sat up from the couch into a half-crouched position, tiptoeing to the front door. But as I passed the couch that blocked the view of the den stairway from the living room, I saw something on the stairway. It was a scream mask, leering up from the stairs at me, but in a way where he was obviously not trying to get caught. The angle at which I saw the mask and the dark lighting made the sight so much more disturbing. When he saw me though, he went the other way, back into the darkness of the den. I locked myself in my room upstairs and called my mom again to tell her what happened. They cut their trip short and came home. Only when my parents got home did I feel safe to leave my room. My dad and I checked the whole den, every closet, every room. Luckily, there was no one. The moral of the story simply comes down to keeping your doors locked, because apparently this guy just helped himself through our back door. My older brother was having a Halloween party. He was a sophomore in college. I was actually only in the 8th grade. Our parents weren't home all weekend, so he was taking advantage of the opportunity, I guess. He made it abundantly clear he didn't want me in the house during the party, but fortunately I already made plans to go trick-or-treating with 2 of my friends. We all agreed it would probably be our last year trick-or-treating, so we wanted to make it a good time. We started midday right after school, the prime time where most kids were out, most everyone answers their doors, and still had abundant supplies of candies. We each filled 2 bags of candy by dark, making stops at our houses in between to bring them home, of course. But we weren't done. We weren't satisfied yet. We needed another bag, of course. After eating dinner and resting at my friend's place for a while, we went back out with empty bags and flashlights. You'll find out why in a little bit. It was probably around 9 o'clock now. Getting candy was a bit slower by now since most buckets were empty and not everyone was answering their doors. An hour flew by because we were still having fun, though we didn't get much candy this time. By the time it was like 10:30 or 11, we stopped because it just seemed obnoxious to knock on people's doors this late. Everyone already went home because it was a Tuesday night, a work night and school night. But we already agreed we'd be skipping school the next day. We were all in the same homeroom and already knew nothing was going on at school tomorrow. So to us, the night was still young. So we went for a run to what locals called the ghoul house. It was a house with some history. A couple got divorced after their child somehow died in the house, and then the wife moved out. A couple weeks later, the husband shot himself at the kitchen table. It's been fenced off ever since. Why the house hasn't been sold or torn down by now is beyond me. When we got there, we realized how scary the house was in the dark. It stood taller than the other houses, and it had a black fence surrounding the front yard, with overgrown bushes hugging it. The front gate was pretty easy to hop. The deviance of what we were doing just made it so much more thrilling. We walked around back just to be safe, hoping no neighbors would see us. The back windows were boarded up from the inside, and the back door had a table wedged up against it. Someone clearly tried really hard to keep people out, possibly a neighbor. Through teamwork, we were able to lift the table quietly from off the door and onto the grass. The door was missing a doorknob, and it pushed in relatively easily. We were inside, and it felt weird, felt uncomfortable, and at the same time exhilarating. All of us had our flashlights, creating a decent amount of light in the otherwise pitch-black building. We were in the back living area of the house, some kind of den. The wood floors were all creaky as hell, and everything seemed to have been untouched for years. It didn't seem like anyone ever really broke in there before. That room was clear of anything interesting, so we moved on to the kitchen. An archaic fridge sat in the corner. One of my friends opened it up, and immediately the room filled with a stale, rotten, plasticky type odor. The fridge had some old empty milk and orange juice cartons. That was about it. The whole kitchen smelled foul, so we got out of there quickly. Next was the living room, and this room was just creepy. Something about it, I don't know, it just made you think that any time you turned around, there'd be someone standing in one of the corners. One of my friends pointed his light up and said, "Look at that." There was a giant hole in the ceiling, which led right up to a room upstairs. As my other friend and I also shined our lights up there was a couple thumps from right above us. We all shut our lights. I got that horrible, painful feeling in my heart area from what I just heard. We all whispered very, very lightly that those were definitely footsteps. One friend whispered we should go up there, see what it was. My other friend and I said absolutely no way and started tiptoeing to the back door. But he was persistent. He didn't follow us. Instead, he went upstairs. He didn't even make a good effort at being quiet about it. We kind of felt like we had to wait for him down in the living room now, so we stayed put. We heard his footsteps upstairs now, crossing the upstairs of the house, until he stopped right above us. My eyes were adjusted to the dark by this point, so even without our flashlights on, I was able to see the figure of my friend, standing above us, looking down through that hole in the ceiling. I tried whispering up there loud enough so that he could hear, but apparently he couldn't. I didn't want to get any louder, but suddenly we heard footsteps coming from the stairway in the living room. We both turned on our flashlights and shined them up to the top of the staircase to see our other friend walking down the stairs. The realization set in immediately, and neither of us had the balls to shine our lights up to that hole in the ceiling to see who was actually standing there. I just screamed run, and we all booked it to the back door, out the house, and to one of my friend's house. The friend who went upstairs said he smelled something foul up there, like a rotting carcass, and that he also heard breathing coming from one of the rooms. To this day, we have no idea who was in that house, but it seemed unlikely that it was just another curious wanderer, given how boarded up the house was. To say the least, we don't go there anymore. When I was a really little kid, this local small amusement park that used to be open by us would hold this annual event called Pumpkin Land, which was held on the Saturday before Halloween, where candies would be given out to kids in between rides, and pumpkins would be scattered throughout the park for families to pick up and take home before leaving. I always looked forward to it, and this one particular year when I was 7, we were going right after my soccer game. The park also rewarded kids for coming in costumes, so I was going in my cliche Scream costume. Anyway, my parents took my 2 siblings and I, and when we got there, my brothers begged to go on the haunted house ride first, and then the roller coasters. Basically, they wanted to do the most thrilling rides first. Anyway, my mom and 2 brothers got in one of the cars for the haunted house ride. Since they only seated 4, my dad stayed with me on the line so we could ride together. And I think as I started to get cold feet, I felt like I needed to use the bathroom. So we got off the line, and my dad led us to the bathroom. He went too, but I finished first, so I waited outside the bathroom. I waited for a while. I was kind of confused. Eventually I went back to the bathroom, and my dad wasn't in there. That's when I started to panic. I was alone in a huge crowd of people, and at 7 years old I was actually scared of being lost. Eventually a man came up to me and asked where my parents were. I told him I couldn't find my dad, and I asked him for help. He took my hand and said, "We're gonna go find them." I remember him leading me with a tight grip of my hand, and suddenly he pulled out his archaic Nokia brick cell phone and started talking to someone on the other end. The only major thing I remember him saying was, "Oh, I'm with him right now," as he looked down at me and smiled. Then he said, "Okay," and hung up. He looked at me again and said that was my dad, and that he was waiting by the parking lot. He continued to lead me. But even at 7 years old, I wasn't an idiot. I was wise to the fact that my dad did not have a cell phone, and that this stranger probably didn't know my dad. How would he even know who I was if I was under a Scream mask? As we were approaching the front gate to the park, I spotted a female employee and started saying "excuse me" over and over until I got her attention. Then I said, "I don't know him, please help." The man defended himself, saying he knew my dad and was trying to get me to him. But the employee took my side and asked me to come stand by her so she could use the loudspeaker to find my parents. The man didn't stay a second longer after that. He walked away quickly into the parking lot. The employee announced over the park intercoms that a child in a Scream costume was missing his parents and gave my name. Eventually my dad came running over waving his hands. He was a nervous wreck. The employee told him of the potential predator and the possible attempted kidnapping, and that's when he lost it. When my mom came over, she was just as furious. My parents asked the manager to see the surveillance footage. Somehow at that time, the amusement park didn't have any surveillance cameras, according to the manager. Still, my parents thanked that employee for getting me away from that man, and we tried to have a normal day after that. I was too young to realize the severity of the potential situation I had just avoided. Obviously, remembering it as an adult is a lot more sickening to think about. When my mom and stepdad went on their honeymoon, I wasn't trusted to watch the house for the week, so they sent me to my Uncle Ronnie's farm. He lives with my Aunt Susie and my cousin Ronnie Jr. They have a spare bedroom upstairs that I stayed in. It's an old-fashioned style wooden farmhouse. It's big and nice though. The spare bedroom overlooked the crops and the numerous scarecrows my uncle had scattered through the crops. This was in mid-October a few years ago, and my uncle was mid-harvesting his corn at this time of the month. He asked for my and Junior's help. Weirdly, it wasn't tedious work, like I kind of enjoyed doing it. He wasn't using his combine. Instead, we were just hand-picking a bunch of corn. I had this little rolling basket-like thing that I was supposed to fill up. I admired the 3 scarecrows he had. They looked like he put a lot of work into them. They had sweatpants on and varying flannels, along with straw hats over their heads. When we were done picking the corn, I asked Uncle Ronnie how long it took to make those. He said a few hours at most, and he said they really do the trick keeping the crows away for the most part. That night after dinner, I played video games and smoked weed with Junior for a little bit. Then I just went to the guest room to do whatever on my laptop. Next thing I knew, a rock or something hit the window. It scared me for sure, as there's no way that wasn't intentional. I didn't want to go look out the window to check though. I just closed my laptop screen so there would be total darkness in the room. I crossed my fingers it wouldn't happen again, but when a second rock hit the window, my heart felt like it dropped out of an airplane. The room was still completely dark, so I gave it a minute before getting up to peek out the window. There was a full moon out, and one of the outside lights was on, both lighting up a decent amount of the crops and one of the scarecrows. I continued to look around, but when I saw something moving in the corner of my eye, I looked back at the scarecrow to see one of its arms waving at me. No, surely I was hallucinating. The waving stopped, and the arm moved back down to its side. I shut the blind and wanted to throw up. I ran to Junior's room and opened the door, but by this point in the night, he was already asleep. I closed his door and checked downstairs for my aunt and uncle, but all the lights were off downstairs, so I checked their bedroom, and they too were both asleep. I went back to my room and lifted the blind just enough to peek out there. The light outside was now off, but with the bright moonlight, I was able to see the scarecrow was still hung up on the stick. I looked out that window for over a minute, waiting for it to move again, but the longer I waited, the more I realized I must have been higher than I realized. I finally dropped the blind back down and climbed into bed. The next morning, I went downstairs to my Aunt Susie making us all pancakes. My uncle was already outside doing work. Aunt Susie called Junior down to eat before all the pancakes were gone. And around that same time, my uncle stormed into the house asking, "Where did the goddamn scarecrows go?" My heart dropped. The 3 of us went outside, my uncle leading us to show us that all 3 scarecrows were missing from their posts. That's when I told him about what I saw last night, and how at first I thought I just imagined it, but now it made sense. The nightmarish realization hit me that somebody did in fact throw rocks in my window. They did see me looking out, and someone was posing as a scarecrow. That night when we were all sleeping, the doorbell rang continuously at like 1 or 2 in the morning. I heard my uncle and Junior yelling in the hallway and running down the stairs, so I followed. When he opened the front door, the 3 scarecrows were posted up right in front of the porch, all with red paint stains covering them, mimicking blood. My uncle called the police and turned on all the outside lights on the property. The police, as well as my uncle, chalked it up to some stupid early Halloween prank by a bunch of immature kids. But the possibility that it wasn't, and that it may have been a much more hostile motive behind this, is what really freaked me out. It was November. All the leaves were varying shades of yellow and orange, my favorite time of year to visit the countryside. I was with my girlfriend at her dad's upstate home, which was usually used as a summer home, but the 2 of us came up there to go camping in the nearby woods. The home had all the needed camping supplies, including the tent, so we parked there and took the camping stuff into the woods. Why? Just the experience of camping and sleeping in the woods, I guess. I've only been camping a few times in my life, but I liked camping in the fall because there's less bugs and of course you can't beat the foliage. We were camped out in a small circular clearing, just big enough for our tent and campfire. We sat around the fire for about an hour, eating and just talking. Then we went inside the tent. We kept the fire going as it made my girlfriend feel safer, and it added a bit of warmth. Besides the sound of the crackling fire, we eventually started hearing leaves crunching in the distance. My girlfriend and I looked at each other. She put her finger up to her lip. I could tell she was nervous. Fires usually repel wildlife from approaching, so as the crunching of the leaves got louder, it got more suspicious. The footsteps also sounded bipedal, like a human's footsteps. The crunches got louder until they stopped around the fire. Then we noticed the shadow outline of someone standing out there, and then they sat down on one of the chairs, but they didn't say a word. So I finally decided I was going to peek my head out and check. I looked out to the campfire, expecting to see someone sitting on one of the chairs, but there was no one out there. I got up on my legs to look around the campsite, into the trees and darkness. I didn't see anyone out there. My girlfriend was whispering something. It sounded like she was urgently trying to get my attention. So I crawled back inside, and she said, "What does he want?" I replied, "There's no one there." She replied, "What are you talking about? I see him in the chair right now." I looked at the wall of the tent and saw the shadow outline of the person still sitting in the chair by the fire. I realized that was impossible, though. I crawled back out of the tent to look one more time, and both the chairs were still empty. I went back inside and said to my girlfriend, "We need to go right now." She didn't ask questions. She got straight up, took my hand, and followed me out of the tent. When she saw there was no one sitting in the chair, she screamed. I yelled at her to shut up, and I led us through the near total darkness in the direction back to the mobile home. While running, we heard this horrible groaning sound not too far away from us, and one single loud crash of a tree branch or something. This caused both of us to scream, "Oh shit," and run even faster. How we found the property was by repeatedly pressing the car lock button until we finally heard the car horn. We went into the mobile home, locked the door, and hid under the covers in the safety of the bedroom. Still, I didn't feel entirely safe being surrounded by nothing but woods in every direction, and I was paranoid that whatever was out there followed us. I let my girlfriend sleep while I stayed up listening for sounds. I thought I heard a clicking or something from the front door to the home, but that might have been my paranoia playing tricks on me. I fell asleep eventually, and when we woke up, we went back for the tent and supplies, scared shitless while doing so. Nothing was moved except for the one chair we thought we saw the shadow sitting in. It was knocked over. We hurried back to the car, drove home, and that was our last camping adventure.
Starting a new job is always a mix of excitement and nerves. When I landed a summer job at a local carnival in downtown LA, I was just looking for some extra cash before my senior year of college started in the fall. The carnival was a typical setup with rides, games, and food stands, but its main attraction was the funhouse, which doubled as a haunted house after dark. It was actually a solid structure that I think used to be some old guy's mansion or something. I was assigned to manage the funhouse, which was a favorite among the carnival goers. It seemed simple enough. Guide the guests in, ensure they have a fun, safe time, and observe them leave. At first, everything seemed straightforward. But then I started noticing odd things. It started with small discrepancies. I'd count a dozen people entering, but only 11 would emerge. At first, I chalked it up to miscounting. After all, keeping track in the chaos of laughter and screams was no easy task. However, as the days passed, the numbers just didn't add up. 7 went in, 6 came out. 10 went in, 9 came out. Was I going crazy? Something was off, and I couldn't ignore it much longer. One particularly busy afternoon, a blonde girl caught my eye as she walked up to the funhouse. She was drop-dead gorgeous, and almost seemed out of place amidst the childlike atmosphere. She couldn't have been more than a few years older than me. I genuinely had to do a double take. I'm not a weird guy by any means, but I couldn't help but lock eyes with her for a few seconds. She smiled, handed me her ticket, and I directed her into the attraction. After she disappeared into the darkness, I went back to my duties. Time ticked by, and I watched attentively as people entered and exited, sometimes asking me questions and whatnot. Admittedly, I was paying a little more attention to the guests that night, as I wanted to see that girl as she left and maybe work up the courage to talk to her. Pretty soon, I started picking up on the fact that groups of people who had entered after her were beginning to emerge. A few more minutes passed, and I started getting worried. She should have been out by now. Compelled by a genuine concern, I decided to abandon my post for a few minutes and go looking for her. I stepped inside and locked the entrance door. I began investigating, navigating the dimly lit rooms and narrow corridors. I moved through the house until I came across something I hadn't noticed during my initial walkthroughs, a barely noticeable seam in the wall. I'm not really sure what I was expecting, but curiosity got the best of me. I pressed against the seam, and I heard a distinct click. I played around with it some more, and my jaw nearly hit the floor when I realized it was a hidden door. It swung open slowly, revealing a pitch-black hallway. I stood there in shock. What in the world was this doing here? I was definitely going to have a long conversation with my boss about this. I walked into the hallway with my phone's flashlight guiding the way. I didn't have much brainpower to spend being nervous because I was still so shocked about the whole situation. I got to the end of the passage and found another door. I flung it open, and to my surprise, it was a concealed exit that led back to the carnival grounds. I breathed a sigh of relief as this discovery proved I wasn't going crazy. All those people I hadn't noticed leaving the attraction had probably stumbled across that secret door by accident and assumed it was the correct way to go. As I walked back the way I had came, I couldn't help but feel a little bummed out that I wasn't going to get the chance to talk to that girl. I'm not sure what came over me, but I decided to keep exploring the funhouse instead of returning to my post. I think a part of me just wanted a few extra minutes of this impromptu break I was taking. I walked through a couple more rooms, and that's when I noticed it. On one of the walls was another faint seam, identical to the first one I had seen. I again played with it until it clicked and swung open. I could immediately tell this one was very different. The putrid smell was the first thing I noticed. More concerning, though, was the fact that there was no corridor in this one, but a ladder that led downwards. I was more confused than anything. This door was on the ground floor, and I was told specifically that this place didn't have a basement. I debated climbing down, but I just felt awful about the prospect that the girl might be down there. So against my instincts, I began the descent. The smell only got worse as I climbed down into the darkness. I was expecting to find a basement, but what I found instead was far, far worse. I got to the bottom and pulled out my phone's flashlight. I was frozen in shock. I was literally standing in a tunnel that extended into the darkness. There was literally no way that this was part of the house above. The rational part of my brain screamed turn back, to forget about it, but the mystery was too compelling. I ventured further, being careful not to make any noise. The walls were damp, and the tunnel was completely silent. As I explored, my flashlight beam fell on something unexpected. A white, glittery purse was sitting in the middle of the corridor. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. It looked familiar, and then it hit me. It was that girl's purse. I was sure of it. I started to panic. Was she really down here? I doubted there was any way a rational person could find this tunnel and not turn around, but the proof was literally in my hands. My mind started racing. Was she hurt? Lost? And then a more terrifying thought hit me. Was she alone? I didn't feel safe anymore, but I was in too deep. Violating every survival instinct I had, I yelled out into the tunnel for that girl. I waited. Nothing. I was just about to shout again when I heard the sound of rapid footsteps echoing through the tunnels. My first instinct was to run. I had every reason to believe whoever was running toward me was hostile. I turned around and bolted back to the ladder. I got halfway up and slipped, falling back to the bottom. The footsteps were basically right on top of me now. I knew I was done for. I braced myself for a fight, and then a voice rang out. A girl's voice. Her voice. She gasped, "Help me," clutching her side as if in pain. I yelled at her to climb up, but she insisted that I follow her back into the darkness for some reason. I told her there was no chance I was doing that, and basically forced her up the ladder. We got to the top, and I slammed the door shut. I asked her how in the world she ended up down there, and she couldn't really give me a straight answer. She kept saying she didn't really remember how it happened, just that she suddenly realized she was underground. She said she started hearing things moving in the dark and that there were voices calling to her. I didn't know how to process this. I asked her if someone had guided her down there, and she said she didn't remember. The weirdest thing about her story was that she was looking at me with this blank stare that genuinely freaked me out. I basically interrogated her about why she told me to stay down there, but she didn't answer. I had had enough. I wanted to get as far away from this person as possible. I called the police, but she opted to leave the funhouse before they got there. I never saw her again. The police investigated, and what they found was actually insane. Apparently, this house had been some sort of safe house during Prohibition in the 1920s. As such, it had a bunch of secret passageways that led to a section of the underground Prohibition tunnels that hadn't been discovered. The owner claimed he had no idea about the house's history, but I was skeptical. I quit my job and got as far away from there as possible. I still have so many questions. Did the owner know about this? Was that girl almost kidnapped? Had someone knocked her out and took her down there or something? Was she part of the whole thing? I feel like there's a number of explanations for what happened to me, but all of them are equally terrifying. Ever since I was a kid, I loved carnivals, the lights, the games, the unpredictable joy of it all. I know lots of people find them weird and childish, but not me. Growing up in a small town in Indiana, it's not like there was a whole bunch to do, so whenever the carnivals would roll through town, you best believe I was spending as much time there as I possibly could. It's been over 20 years, and I still enjoy the atmosphere of a local carnival, despite what I'm about to tell you. I think my love for carnivals is something I'll never lose. I was like 10 or 11 when this happened, and I was a kind of nerdy kid growing up. In the days leading up to the spring carnival, I found myself in the library reading up on whatever I found interesting at the time. For whatever reason, I wound up in the history section. I remember the books being literally caked in layers of dust. That's how long it had been since they were even touched. I was flipping through a book on the history of our town when a small, faded slip of paper fell out from between the pages. Confused, I leaned down to pick it up. To my pleasant surprise, it was a ticket for our local spring carnival, dated over 15 years ago. The odds of something like that happening had to be extremely low. I was ecstatic. This ticket would make a great addition to my miscellaneous collection back home. What was even cooler, though, was the fact that the date on the ticket was just 2 days away, when the carnival would certainly be in town. As I predicted, the carnival cruised into town the next morning, so I figured why not use the old ticket, just for laughs to see what the booth attendant would say. I wanted to get it punched anyway. The next evening, I headed to the carnival with the ticket safely tucked away in my pocket. As I approached the entrance, the carnival seemed just as lively as ever, the air filled with the scent of cotton candy and popcorn. I pulled out the ticket at the gate, handing it over to the guy at the booth. His face changed the moment he saw it. He went pale, his eyes widening slightly before he masked his reaction with a forced smile. It was honestly a little creepy. Enjoy your evening," he stammered, handing me back the ticket without punching it. I was so weirded out by his reaction that I forgot to ask him to punch it. I shrugged it off though, thinking maybe he was just new and confused about the old design of the ticket. I wandered around, played some games, and enjoyed a funnel cake. The night was perfect, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I felt eyes on me, observing. Maybe it was just paranoia. I tried to ignore it at first, but I kept noticing the carnival employees giving me weird looks. After a while, I got fed up and decided to ask one of the older game operators about it. I found a kind-looking elderly man running the ring toss booth. I showed him the ticket, and unlike the booth guy, he didn't even try to hide his shock. He glanced around nervously before leaning closer. "Young man, where did you get this?" he asked. After telling him where I found it, I started feeling uneasy about the whole situation. Maybe I should have just kept the ticket at home. "You found something you weren't meant to find," the old man started, his voice dropping to a whisper. "This ticket, it's part of a story that the folks around here don't talk about much. About 15 years ago, something terrible happened during the carnival, right here in this town." He paused as if weighing whether to continue. "There was a young worker, name of Ryan, nice kid. Everybody liked him. He was responsible for one of the rides, I can't remember which. One night he just disappeared, vanished without a trace. The police found his wallet, but there was nothing in it except a ticket that looked an awful lot like this one, he said, gesturing towards my hands. The atmosphere around us seemed to drop a few degrees. He continued. They searched everywhere, even drained the local pond, but no sign of him. After that, strange things started happening every time the carnival stopped here. Accidents, things going missing, odd sightings. People said it was Ryan trying to come back, or something worse that took him. I could feel a chill running down my spine, but a part of me was skeptical. And you believe that? I asked. The old man shrugged. I've seen enough to keep an open mind, but the point is, the ticket you found might stir things up. It's best you get rid of it, leave it here. He then motioned for me to give it to him, but I was reluctant. I looked down at it, reading it over again as if there was some kind of secret I was missing. How could a ticket be the cause of all of that? I questioned, still not fully buying it. The look in his eye got darker. His tone switched, almost as if he were angry. He told me to give it here, almost in a growl. I considered it, but concluded that some stupid story wasn't worth giving up such a cool souvenir. I told him no, and he actually sprung up with a quickness that startled me. He reached for the ticket, his fingers grazing my hand. I jerked back instinctively, clutching the ticket tighter. The old man's expression morphed into something desperate, almost predatory. "You don't understand," he hissed, his eyes darting around as if expecting something or someone to emerge from the shadows. I backed away towards the tent's exit, my heart pounding. "I think I should go," I stammered, turning to lose myself in the crowd. Behind me, I could hear his calls, a mix of pleading and warning. I didn't care what he was saying, though. I let the bustling crowd around me drown his voice out. My mind was racing, not even about the ticket, but more so his aggressive reaction. The joy of the carnival had been spoiled. I left earlier than planned, the ticket burning a hole in my pocket. Over the next few days, my luck seemed to turn sharply. I missed catching the school bus, scraped my knee pretty bad in a bike accident, and worst of all, my best friend accused me of stealing his favorite baseball card, something I would never do. Things got worse than that, though. I remember coming home one night to my mother in tears after losing her job. My brother broke his leg skateboarding the next week, and our beloved family pet, Bean, also passed away a few days after that. It was like a dark cloud had settled over me since that night at the carnival. I couldn't help but remember the old man's warning about the ticket stirring things up. It seemed ridiculous, but then again, so was the string of bad luck that followed me. My dad laughed when I told him about my theory. He told me that there was no such thing as ghosts, and that I shouldn't be so superstitious. One rainy afternoon after school, after a particularly tough day where I had forgotten my lunch and had to go hungry, I pulled the ticket out. I stared at it, this small piece of paper that had brought nothing but trouble. Feeling a mix of anger and fear, I decided I had had enough. I grabbed my raincoat and boots and trudged out to the creek that ran behind our house. My heart felt like it was pounding out of my chest as the rain soaked through my hair. Standing at the creek's edge, I took one last look at the ticket before tearing it into tiny pieces and watching them get swept up by the current. It's just a piece of paper, I thought. Things started to look up after that. My friend found his baseball card and apologized to me, and we became friends again. I didn't miss the bus a single time that school year. My mom got a better job in the next couple of days. Whether it was all a coincidence or that ticket really was cursed, I couldn't say. But one thing was for sure, I learned to be more careful about what I picked up and brought home. I don't believe in the supernatural, even after all this stuff happened to me. My parents like telling me that I imagined everything because I was so young. It's still hard to fully explain it, but I've long since accepted it as one of those weird coincidences that you just can't explain. I hate carnivals. I think they're disgusting and filled with children. I hate the food, the games, and the smell of it all. My hatred of carnivals is probably biased though, and mostly based on what I'm about to tell you. A few years ago, I was dragged to our local carnival by my younger sister. I obviously wasn't going to be rude and not go, but I wasn't looking forward to it. After a while, my sister got bored and wanted to leave, so I called my mom to pick us up. I actually opted not to go with them, as I was in the midst of a fight with my dad and didn't want to go back home until he was asleep. I told my mom I'd walk home later, so she picked up my sister and left. The carnival was honestly a little pathetic. There were far fewer people there that night than I remember there being in previous years, and everyone looked miserable. I figured I might as well walk around a little to try and get my money's worth. After all, I had paid for a ticket out of my own pocket. I decided to step into the funhouse, as I figured that would at least be a little cool. I was expecting there to be a ton of people in there, but it was completely empty. There was literally not a single other person in there as far as I could tell. I had never been inside a funhouse alone before. People don't realize how important the laughter and talking is to the atmosphere. Without it, you're basically just standing there in silence, surrounded by a bunch of weird mirrors. It was honestly a little creepy. I shrugged my shoulders and figured I might as well walk through it. Admittedly, I did get a pretty good laugh out of the distorted mirrors. I think I was like halfway through when I noticed something odd. In one of the reflections to my left, there was a head that seemed to be peering at me. I only saw it for a split second, but it was a bald guy with really sunken eyes. I whipped around but didn't see anyone. To be completely honest, I had no idea where he had even been standing since there were mirrors all over the place. He could have literally been anywhere. I thought it was especially creepy since I didn't hear the funhouse entrance open. He either snuck in behind me, or he had already been inside. I kept walking, going a little more quickly now. And then, I saw him again, out of the corner of my eye. He had this strange smile this time. It was the exact same face, I was positive. I tried to figure out where he was standing, but the reflections were too confusing. I yelled for him to get lost, but got no response. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. I picked up the pace again, but it was difficult trying to navigate this maze of mirrors, and I kept hitting dead ends. I started sweating, constantly looking over my shoulder every few seconds. A few minutes later, I turned a corner after hitting another dead end, and a hand reached out from behind one of the mirrors, grabbing my wrist. I screamed, cursing at the guy to let go of me, but he held firm. I punched his arm, forcing him to let go. I fell to the ground in the fray, and saw the creepster in his full form. He was wearing all gray, had a bit of a gut, and a tired, sunken face. I jumped to my feet before he could reach for me again, and sprinted back the way I came. I don't know if it was survival instincts or not, but finding my way back to the entrance was somehow easier with the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I sprinted out of the funhouse and caught my breath. I reached into my back pocket, and a horrifying realization hit me. I didn't have my wallet. I must have dropped it when I fell. There was no way I was going back in there. After running to the nearest staff person, I told them everything that happened. She seemed confused and told me that the funhouse was closed to patrons that night. I was horrified. They called the police and searched it, but found nothing, not even my wallet. I felt like such an idiot. I told them that that guy was probably an ex-employee with a key, but they shrugged off my theory and told me to go home. So, reluctantly, that's what I did. It's not like I had gotten hurt or anything. I wish I could tell you the story ended there, but I can't. A week later, my girlfriend called me one night in a panic, frantically screaming into the phone about something terrible that happened. Apparently, someone had been texting her phone pretending to be me and convinced her to drive out to this remote location to help me change a tire. Thankfully, she decided to bring her dad, even though the guy told her to come alone. They pretty quickly realized what was going on when the car parked in the lot wasn't mine. Her dad stepped out of the car, and 6 dudes stepped out of the car in front of them. He sprinted back to the car and hightailed it out of there before those guys could catch up to him. The whole thing made sense. I did have my girlfriend's number written down on a slip of paper in my wallet, which explains how he got her number. Both of us changed all our contact information, and it's been a month without incident. I really don't know how to feel about this whole ordeal. I think I'm just going to try to block the memory out of my head.
A lot of you guys wanted a part 2 to the clown stories, so I figured with all the clown stuff still going on, this would be the best time to do one more of these. Three days ago, I had an encounter with one of those crazy clowns that everyone's hearing about lately. Most people are running into them on the road in the safety of their cars. I, however, had a much more disturbing encounter. I live in Massachusetts. My property is enclosed by trees with a long, winding driveway leading to the road. During the day, I was cutting down a drooping branch from a tree above the entrance to my property. That's when I first saw him. A clown. or a guy dressed as a clown I should say, walking down the side of the road and stopping very slowly right at the center of the start of my driveway. He very gradually turned his head to face me, body still facing the road. I had to give him credit, his clown costume was terrifying. The mask looked horror movie status. I chuckled to myself and smiled in his direction. Judging by everyone else's experiences, I was expecting him to start bluff charging me, but he didn't. He just turned his head back to the road and kept walking. I would have said something, but I guess I just didn't care enough. That night I did my usual locking up of the shed outside and shutting off all the lights. When I got inside to start making dinner, I thought I heard something coming from outside. I opened the kitchen window a little more, but all I could hear was the wind and leaves blowing. I shut the window completely now and resumed making the food. I almost had a heart attack when there was a heavy, aggressive knocking coming from that same window I just shut. My whole body immediately went into panic mode. I felt every body part shaking, and my heart thumping twice as much than usual. I took the knife I had sitting on the counter and brought myself to look out the window, but it was literally too dark to even see past the glass. Once again, I struggled to sum up the courage to do something I felt needed to be done, which was this time to turn on the patio light and go outside. So I walked over to the back sliding glass door in my kitchen, put my finger under the light switch, afraid to flick it, waiting for a good 5 seconds, and finally did it. The horror I was afraid to experience out there came prematurely before I could even step outside. The patio light exposed the same clown from earlier, standing right outside the sliding glass door, head tilted like a dog staring at me behind the ugly mask. I could have and probably should have opened the door there and then and stabbed the guy, or at least threatened him, but it's so easy to think back and say I should have done that. Instead, I simply ran upstairs to the telephone where I called the police. I could hear banging on the heavy glass door downstairs all the way up from my bedroom. And it got worse, as the clown started pounding with both hands repeatedly as opposed to the slow and steady knocking he was giving before. It got the worst when the clown started screaming like a psychotic asylum patient over the sounds of the pounding on the door. I felt like I was going to die. Literally every minute that went by that the cops hadn't arrived yet felt like 5 minutes. The screaming and banging finally came to a stop when I heard a familiar voice outside yelling, "What the hell are you doing, and get the fuck out of here." I looked out the window to see Marv, my neighbor, walking over with a rifle in his hand. When I went outside to greet and thank him, he told me the clown ran off into the woods. The cops arrived briefly after that and took down my description, did a quick 5-minute sweep of the property, and left. Marv let me crash at his place for the night just in case. We don't play with shit when it comes to our well-being and safety. So yeah, at the time I'm sharing this, that was only 3 days ago, in the midst of all this clown horror. There was this Instagram account made, and it was supposedly made by clowns who threatened to come to my school. Of course it was taken seriously and police were called. Even the SWAT team arrived to my school. The time the clowns said they would come was around 11 a.m., so by the time 11 o'clock came around, everyone was freaking out. I, on the other hand, along with a couple other friends, knew it was probably fake and wasn't going to happen. I even heard a story where someone saw a clown at the local pool and chased a peer of mine around. I didn't believe it though. But anyways, at around 11:15, I heard the panicked voice of my vice principal come over the loudspeaker and say, "We are now going into lockdown. Please shut the doors and lock the windows." I started to get a little freaked out, but kept my cool. We all huddled in the corner of the room out of sight from the door. The normal procedure. We had to stay there for an hour and a half, just waiting in silence. The vice principal's voice eventually came back onto the intercom, and he said we were free to go home since it was the end of the day. To say the least, I was relieved. I gathered my things and started walking home. My house was about a mile away from the school, so the walk was about 20 minutes. I jammed my earbuds in about a minute into the walk. I have to walk past a couple strips of forest, which today of all days kind of freaked me out, but I didn't really let it bother me too much. About 5 minutes into my walk, I was passing the forest when I saw someone wearing very bright colors. I looked away, telling myself it's just in my head, but I looked back and saw it again. It was wearing white and yellow polka-dotted baggy pants, except its entire outfit was ripped and dirty. It was wearing a yellow button-up top kind of thing. That was all ripped and dirty as well. It had a mask on with red hair puffing out of it. Its head was tilted and it was just standing, staring at me. It started to laugh hysterically and then started running towards me. I screamed and dropped my bag and ran back to the school to find a police officer there. I told him what happened. He cursed under his breath. Him and a bunch of other police officers got in their cars to go drive over there. Truthfully, I'm not sure if the clown got caught or not, but I would sure like to hope that he did. Rumors went around school that a clown did actually walk up to the front door of the school, threatening to come in. I didn't see it, so I don't know for sure, but it's possible that this was the same clown. The police went on a manhunt for him around the area I told them about, but the clown was likely gone and hiding in the woods. That means this clown remains free to scare and terrorize more people, along with the rest. Friday night, October 7th, 2016. It's like 1 in the morning. I'm walking home from my friend's house a little buzzed. He lives almost a mile away. I stop at the T intersection of 2 roads and the trail that leads into the woods. There's no lights in there, but it's a definite shortcut that I always take during the day. Admittedly, I was wary of going in there simply because I found it creepy at night. I figured I'd save a good 10 minutes cutting through there instead of walking down the curvy roads, so I went for it. Using nothing but the light on my phone, I began to navigate the woods. The only reason going through the woods was quicker was because the roads in my neighborhood wind around a lot and you can't really just find a straight road to cut through in my house's direction. Around 50 yards into the woods, I heard noises coming from up ahead. It sounded like more people. Normally I wouldn't find this too weird. It was a Friday night though, and sometimes kids would go into the woods to smoke after all. But still, with the thought of all this clown stuff going on, especially in my area, I feared for the worst. I covered the light from my phone as I was trying to turn it off, and tiptoed around a big tree to hide. When the sounds got closer, it became obvious that they were footsteps, just as I feared. In the back of my mind, I knew the odds of running into clowns in the woods was next to none. I just also wanted to avoid contact with anyone in the woods at this hour. It soon became apparent that there were 2 people walking by. I tried to remain as quiet as possible, hoping they didn't see the light. These 2 people weren't talking at all though. I could only hear their shoes hitting the leaves on the trail. That is, hitting the leaves up until around where I was standing. Then they stopped. I got that painful feeling in my heart and stomach area that you get whenever something shocking or scary happens. I daringly stuck my head around the tree, and I could see 2 people standing there in the darkness, and I immediately recognized their bizarre attire. These were 2 clowns. It didn't feel real. I even imagined this exact scenario playing out in these woods, and here it was happening now. I knew they would have seen the light, that's why they were stopped. They knew I was hiding somewhere. The question was, what were they going to do to me? It was the most tense moment of my life. However, it only lasted maybe 20 seconds. Then I heard the 2 clowns continue walking down the trail. When they were far enough away, I hopped up and ran for the other side of the woods, not caring how much noise I made. My house was across the street from the woods, so as soon as I made it across, I was basically home. My mom was already asleep by then, so I went around back and unlocked the back door with our secret key. I made a point of locking the door right away and shutting the blinds. I walked over to the living room about to shut those blinds, when I noticed the clowns across the street, standing by the edge of the woods, facing my house. I couldn't tell if they were actually staring at me or not, but they were just still like statues, and I'm sure they were trying to scare me. I woke my mom, and she went to go check it out. But just like in any horror movie, the clowns were gone, meaning I was the only one who actually saw them. I tried to go to sleep, and given that I was still buzzed, kind of helped ease me into a sleepy state. In my bed, after facing the wall for a while, I got uncomfortable, so I flipped over to the other side, where I had a view of my whole room. Even though I was tired, I had trouble keeping my eyes closed, simply because I couldn't stop thinking about those clowns. What if they were out there right now? The curiosity was killing me to the point where I wanted to get up and look out my window. The sound of the thud on the window was like the sound of death to my ears. I knew what it was, and I didn't move. I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. I ignored it. Still not moving an inch. The thuds were getting more intense, and I feared they would break open the window. I finally took a look at the window, and under the blinds, the section that wasn't blocked, I saw a clown with his head to the side, looking at me laying in my bed. That was all it took for me to break down screaming, running to my mom's room and crying to her that there was a clown outside my window like a baby. She took me very seriously and took the pepper spray she had under the bed, marched over to my bedroom window, and once again, the clown was gone. My mom believed me, of course. She is my mom, after all. She didn't give me some cliched horror movie bullshit like I'm just seeing things or I had too much to drink. No, she really believed me. In fact, she called the cops the next day and reported that there were clowns in the area harassing us. But that wasn't the end of it. Last night I once again saw a clown standing across the street by the woods again, staring at my house. I still feel sick and paranoid about all of this. However, I'm planning on getting a picture or video of it the next time it happens to prove this is all true.
During Christmas break, my friends Chris, Presto, Robert, Luke, Chase, Jamie, and Kevin were tired of just only watching football all night and decided that one day we would ding-dong ditch. Towards the end of our break, we all gathered at a pizza place and started going around town trying to find a perfect house. After we found a house, my friend Chris rang the doorbell like 5 times and we all ran away laughing. Then we did this for a second time and we all ran away laughing again. When we went back for a third time, my friend Chris again went to ring the bell and he rang it again at least 5 times and we all ran away. After this time, we thought that the people in the house were just not giving into our prank and we started to walk back to my friend Presto's house. While all of a sudden, I looked back and saw this man charging full speed at us. I told everyone to start running and I saw the panic in all my friends' eyes. Presto slipped while we were running but was fast enough to catch back up with us. We then took shelter in Presto's backyard, and we saw the man wandering around the block looking for us until he gave up. We were all scared and decided to just go home, but we wanted to do the same house again the next day. When the next day arrived, I told my friends that this time I would ring the bell because I haven't in a while. When I got up and rang the bell and we all started to run away, we all saw the man again chasing us. After we kept running and couldn't see him, we noticed that the man was now in his car speeding after us. This is when we started to split up. Me, Chase, Robert, and Kevin all ran down one block, while Luke, Jamie, and Presto ran down another. After Chase and Robert found a place to hide, Kevin and I were still running away from the man. We hid under some trees for 10 seconds, thinking we lost the man, until the man started to run over people's properties and curbs still after us. This is when Kevin started to run away and I followed him. But because Kevin had a head start, he was able to escape, and the man saw me and nearly hit me with his car while blocking my way. While the man stopped his car in front of me, I quickly took out my phone and recorded this video.
Get over here. Where were you going?
Sir, I swear I gotta do anything.
Where were you going?
Sir, I swear I gotta do anything.
Get in
Sir.
the car. Get in the car, you fuck!
Here you can see the man's reaction, asking me where I was going and telling me to get in his car as he was holding my head and arm but let go of my arm to open the door. While he was doing this, I took my hand and pushed his hand off my head, which gave me enough room to escape. While I was sprinting down the road, I remember seeing the man going right back into his car about to chase me again. But since I had a head start on the man, I decided to hide in a bush as I saw him speed down the block trying to find me again. Right after this, I told my friends to all run back to my house and that the man was roaming around the block trying to look for all of us.
When my friends came back to my house, I instantly showed them the video and they were truly scared. To this day, I have never been as scared for my life as I was that night. Most kids who play Ding Dong Ditch are, I'd say, between the ages of 10 and 14. My friends and I, however, I guess matured a little later. We were 16, juniors in high school. We live in, I guess, what most would call the typical middle-class suburbs. Most of the houses are basic and look more or less the same. There is one house that a lot of people know about a few blocks away from me. It has an architectural style much different and more archaic looking than the rest. It had a for sale sign out front for the longest time, and I guess around a year after the for sale sign disappeared was when this story took place. We weren't sure if someone had moved in or not, as the grass never seemed to be cut. But on an uneventful weekend night, two friends and I wanted to play Ding Dong Ditch on the house. The reason we wanted to target this house was simply because it was different, and we wondered if the person potentially living in it would be different as well, aka a better reaction. When we did this, we always had each person ring the bell at least once. My friend Joel went first. He tried ringing the bell, then said back to us the doorbell didn't seem to work, so we made knocking motions. He knocked on the door really hard, then he ran for the bush next to the front door. We waited for a minute, but no answer. Joel came running back. It was my turn to go. I ran up to the front door, and instead of giving a loud knock, I banged really hard on the door. As I banged, the door pushed open just a tad, giving me a near heart attack and causing me to Olympic sprint behind the bushes in the front of the house. I crouched down in the bushes alongside Joel and Eric, expecting someone to come outside, but the door just stayed in place, open just 1 or 2 inches. I guess I banged so hard the door pushed off the latch and caused it to creep open. At this point, we were wondering if anyone was even home, let alone if someone even lived here, considering there were no cars in the driveway or parked out in the street. We came up with a really stupid idea of going inside the house, since it didn't appear anyone was inside. I was the one to kind of lead the way inside, pushing the door open quietly and creeping into the living room. There wasn't any furniture in the living room besides a couple wooden chairs and an old-fashioned center table, or coffee table I guess you'd call it, sitting in the middle of the room. Moonlight mixed with the light from the streetlights outside shone through the windows, so we could see enough if you're wondering how we saw without flashlights. We crept into the kitchen, and this was where it got gross. There was a foul odor in there, and when we opened the fridge, we realized where it was coming from. There was a bunch of old, expired, rotting things in there. The putrid smell was like a mix of long-spoiled milk and rotting meats. The fridge wasn't turned on, obviously. In our heads, this confirmed nobody could be living here, so we became a little less unnerved by the idea of someone possibly being in there as well. So with that, we decided we'd look upstairs. We were a lot less quiet now going up the stairs. There were a bunch of rooms upstairs. The house wasn't exactly tiny. All the doors were closed, so opening them was a little creepy, honestly. The three of us split off into different rooms, just seeing if anything interesting would be inside. I left from one bedroom to another one, which already had the door open, so either Eric or Joel already went inside. It was another basically empty room. It had some old nightstand in the corner, and I could see marks on the floor from where a bed used to be. Then I heard a creaking sound in the room. The room was decently sized, but I didn't see either of them inside of here. However, I did see this huge black hole in the wall opposite me. I walked closer to it. It was literally this huge hole leading into the insides of the walls. It was pitch black in there, I couldn't see anything beyond the hole. But as I got closer, I heard breathing. I already knew it was one of them waiting to scare me. I said both their names though, and they both called back "what" from different rooms. I don't have to explain what that meant, and what was going on in my head. While most people probably would have ran, I took a few steps closer to the hole out of my stupid curiosity. My two friends entered the room behind me, I guess giving me a little more confidence to step closer. I was maybe 4 feet from the hole when I thought I saw something in there. Something moving. My two friends were whispering, "What do you see?" I was dumb enough to get closer. I was probably 2 feet from the hole in the wall now, when someone's arm reached out from the darkness and started yanking on the collar of my shirt. My friends came to help, and in Joel's words, he clawed at the wrinkly, pale-looking arm until it let go. Then we bolted downstairs and out the front door. We contemplated calling the cops, but with the chance of someone actually living in there, we didn't want to basically admit to breaking and entering. We agreed to just not tell our parents or anyone about it that might get us in trouble. At a certain hour in the night, you enter a certain mental state in which you're not expecting to be disturbed by the outside world. Like, for example, hearing the doorbell or your phone ringing at 3 a.m. is something that would send shivers down most people's spines. So I guess I'll start by saying this was in July of 2020. I don't run the AC much. I tend to leave the windows open with the fan on full blast by my bed. It was very late in the night. I'd been in bed for hours, that's all you need to know. I remember waking up, but not knowing why. I thought I heard some kind of dinging sound, but I couldn't tell for sure. I turned off the fan for a minute, listened, but it didn't happen again. So I turned the fan back on and lay back down. But a few moments later I heard it again. I turned the fan off quickly this time, and then I realized it was the doorbell I was hearing. I looked at the clock and started to feel incredibly uncomfortable. Who could be ringing my bell in the middle of the night? I grabbed one of my baseball bats from my closet and made my way downstairs. I did so quietly, so that I could sneak to the window and peek outside. There wasn't anyone on the front deck. Naturally, having to defend my property, I opened the front door and stepped out onto the deck. No one in sight. Some stupid kids ding-dong ditching, what else? Though all that was going through my head was that any kids doing that at this hour were real sons of bitches. I closed the door, but I sat in the living room expecting it to happen again. I gave it a few minutes. Then as I was halfway up the stairs, I went as fast as I could down the stairs and back to the front door. I didn't catch them in time though. I wasn't about to deal with this. I got 911 on the phone and told them some little shits were ding-dong ditching my house at this insane hour. The operator wasn't really helpful though. He said it's very likely just some stupid kids and to just stop answering the door and they'll eventually give up. When I asked, he said to call back if they really don't give up, or if they go beyond ringing the doorbell. I didn't like hearing that though, it made me a little uneasy. I went back upstairs to my room and turned on the fan full blast to block out the sound of the doorbell. I heard it again over the sound of the fan, but I didn't entertain it. I just really hoped it was actually some dumb kids. When it finally seemed like they had given up, some loud sound made me jump in my bed. At first I didn't know what it was, but I looked at my window and saw that it was getting soaked. It took me a second to understand someone was spraying my window with the hose. It stopped after a few seconds. I didn't even want to move out of the bed in fear that they would hear that, even as much as I wanted to go for the phone. Then there was a voice, not of a child's. It was a deeper voice, though I can't say exactly how deep because it was someone calling up, "Hey, come outside to your shed." I wanted to be anywhere but in my house at that moment. I got up and looked out the wet window, but there was no one down there. I went for the phone and called the cops again. The same operator picked up. After telling him what just happened, he told me to sit tight and wait for an officer to arrive at my house. Then we hung up. I had a little more peace of mind now, but still, I went downstairs to the den area of my house, which is the lowest level of my house, ground level to the backyard. The back door is in the den, as is the back entrance to the garage. When I looked out the window to the shed in the backyard, I could see one of the two doors to the shed was swung completely open. I couldn't see into the shed, and no way was I going out there. But while expecting someone to poke their head out from the shed, I heard a light creak and noticed in the corner of my eye the back door to the garage opening. It opened in a manner that I knew it was pushed. It wasn't the wind. Looking into the dark abyss that was my garage, someone went, "Psst," to break the silence. They were inside my house. I went for the front door and waited outside in front of my house. My garage door was open. My idiot self didn't lock it, and I must have not heard it opening over the sound of the fan. A police car pulled up in front of my house moments later, and he had me wait with him while he called for backup when he realized this was a break-in case. When two other officers eventually came to help look around the house, I stayed outside with one while the other two checked the house and backyard shed. When they said it was safe to come in, I did a little searching myself before they did a police report and left. Of course, from this point on, I always make sure to remember to lock everything. This was extra terrifying for me because it started as what I hoped was just a couple kids pulling a prank, and it turned into someone literally breaking into my house.
I work nights for the Sheriff's Department in Bergen County. I've been on the force for 2 years. I haven't seen too much craziness, aside from late-night drug arrests, a few robbery calls, and a few assault calls. Northeastern Bergen County is pretty low crime after all, so those are usually the worst calls I deal with. There was this one night that I received a disturbance call to investigate a scream that came from a house nearby. Usually a call like this would mean a domestic dispute, or even just something as harmless as people drinking and being too loud. I arrived to the house though, and I had to confirm twice that it was the correct house, because none of the lights were on. There was a car in the driveway though, a blue Toyota Sienna minivan. Someone was home. I went over to knock on the door a few times. The neighbor must have seen my car because he came out and walked over, reporting that he was the one to call the police. He told me he heard a blood-curdling scream from the house, and that the woman who lives there lives alone but occasionally had her boyfriend over, making it slightly more concerning. I tried the doorknob now, which was locked. I then made my way around the house, trying all the windows, which were all locked. All but one of the backyard windows. It was already slid completely up, enough for someone to climb through. This was a red flag, considering every other window was closed. I requested backup to the scene, and once I got confirmation, I climbed into the house through the window. I started to flick every light on that I could find in the house, starting in the kitchen and working my way to the living room. And yes, it's advisable for police to turn on the lights when investigating buildings. What you see in TV shows and movies where they leave the lights off is only done for suspense. I called out for the woman, trying to assure her it's okay, police were here. Though at that time, I still didn't know what exactly the situation was, other than she was reported screaming. There was no response no matter how loud I yelled. The first floor was clear, so there was only the upstairs left to check. I wanted to wait for backup to arrive, because I was nervous what I'd find up there, but I'd also not forgive myself if I waited and wasted precious time that I could have used to save this woman from a possible medical emergency. Before going up the stairs, I unlocked the front door for when backup would arrive. I then walked up the carpeted stairs quietly, and as I got halfway up the stairs, I peered over the ledge onto the second floor. There were 4 doors up there. I flicked on the light switch in the hallway and called out one more time. I heard a creak-type sound come from behind one of the doors, so she had to be in there. I opened the door, and it was a bedroom. The light was off, but the light from the hall was plenty to see a woman laying in bed under the covers. I saw the back of her head. I walked over to her to make sure she was okay, but as I was close, I noticed dark stains that soaked the other side of the covers. The side of her I couldn't see from the door. I yanked the covers off the woman and realized it was blood, and she'd been stabbed multiple times, but she was still breathing. I grabbed my walkie and reported a stabbing, requesting immediate backup and an ambulance. The creak I heard moments before suddenly made no sense if this woman was in bed like this. And given she was unconscious, someone placed her in the bed most likely. I did a 360 in place, looking around the room. There was a closet. It was instinctively the first place I'd think to look. I had my gun drawn and had my hand on the doorknob for 5 seconds, gathering the courage to yank the door open. When I finally did, there was no one inside. I turned around again to look at the bed, at the bleeding woman. Then I thought, the bed. I got on my knees to be level with the bottom of the bed. I yanked the bed wrap covering the bottom of the bed up, and I was then eye to eye with a man wearing a face mask covering the lower half of his face. I shrieked and yelled, "Show me your hands." He slowly raised his hands above his head as much as he could. I got up and told him to get out from under the bed slowly and made sure he wasn't holding the knife. I had him stand in the corner with his hands up until my backup came. I wasn't about to try and handcuff him in there alone, when he could have any weapon on his person. I told backup to meet me upstairs, and when they entered the house, I called up to them. Only then did I place the man under arrest. An ambulance arrived not too long after, and the woman was rushed to the hospital, and she managed to survive being stabbed 6 times. The man who did it was in fact her boyfriend, which I didn't find too surprising, honestly. The man had found out that she cheated on him with his friend, and when he called her about it, she broke up with him over the phone, and this must have caused the man to snap. I'm just very thankful the woman survived. This story was told to me by my best friend's uncle, who works the night shift as a police officer in our city. A year or so ago, Mike, my best friend's uncle, was out on his nightly patrol with his partner Steve.
They've been working together for years, and they're both Army veterans, so they're very level-headed and calm people, perfect for being police officers. When they got a call from a landlord at an apartment complex complaining about one of his tenants, they didn't really expect anything bad. They get calls like that all the time, so they headed over to see what was going on. When they arrived, the landlord greeted them outside. It was probably 1 or 2 in the morning, and everyone from the complex was standing out in the grass, which was odd. The landlord approached Mike and Steve and started to rant about one of their neighbors being crazy and turning all of the water on in his apartment. Apparently he was some guy in his 30s, and he'd been acting weird lately. Mike could see that there was water seeping out from the front door to the place and decided they had to go in and do a welfare check on the guy. When they walked in, water was pouring down the stairs and clearly flooding the building, which meant that this water had to have been turned on for hours to cause this kind of damage. They climbed to the 2nd story and knocked on the door where the water was gushing out from. The landlord told them that the tenant's name was Adam, and so they pounded on the door calling his name. No one answered for a couple minutes, and so they decided to break the door down. When they did, they spotted Adam standing in his kitchen. All of the sinks, the shower, and the toilet from the bathroom and a hose from outside were gushing water everywhere. Adam was standing there shaking. His eyes were wide like he was terrified to move. "Adam, what's going on? Are you all right?" Mike asked while his partner Steve walked further inside to check everything out. Steve walked into the bathroom to turn off the water and to make sure no one else was in the apartment. Mike slowly approached Adam, who seemed terrified because he was shaking so much. He didn't even look at Mike as he approached. Again, he was asked what was wrong, and he finally stuttered out that there are people in the walls. Mike didn't hear what he was saying at first, but as he got closer, Adam started to hear it over and over, louder and louder. "There are people in the walls," until he was almost screaming it, getting himself worked up. Steve walked into the bedroom next and was clearing the room when he checked the closet and noticed something as he turned on the light. There was a very faint line that ran across the wall. At first he didn't think anything of it, but then he heard what Adam was screaming, and a sinking feeling hit his gut. The more he stared at it, the more he realized that the line was in the shape of a door cut out of the wall. It clearly wasn't meant to be there. Mike was about to lead Adam out of the apartment when Steve suddenly called to him, "You better take a look at this." Mike went into the other room to see Steve pointing his gun at the wall in the bedroom, clearly freaked out. They both approached the door, guns raised, while Adam started to cry in the back room. Steve quickly pulled a piece of wall back, and they both froze when 3 sets of eyes stared back at them. 3 people were pressed together in this tiny space in the wall, their faces painted in weird patterns. Both Steve and Mike ordered them out and handcuffed each one. By that time, backup had arrived and some other police officers got Adam out of there. They led the 3 downstairs and sent them off to jail. Mike and Steve were deeply disturbed by the whole exchange. It was only made worse when a couple months later, they found out that the 3 people on the wall were from some crazy cult out in the woods, and they were trying to get Adam to join them. They preyed on him because they knew he had a past history of being mentally unstable, and they were trying to scare him. He turned on all the water in an attempt to flush them out of his own home. To this day, Mike and Steve say that this was the most disturbing call they've ever been on. This one time when I was working a 12-hour overnight shift, I went out on a call for a suspicious person walking house to house, knocking on doors, and saying things to people through their doors or to their doorbell cameras. I arrived to the man's house who called it in, and he explained better in person that it was a middle-aged woman with long, wiry hair holding something behind her back, going door to door yelling at people to open up and mumbling to herself. The man who called the police had a Ring doorbell camera, and so he showed me the footage that it caught. The woman came up to the door, looked at the camera for a few minutes, literally, then pressed the button. She started speaking into the mic of the doorbell, and the homeowner started talking back through his phone, starting by asking who she is and what she wants. She kept saying, "Open the door, she needs blood," and would smile and cackle each time she said it. When he threatened to call the police, she laughed and started basically punching the door and trying to remove the Ring doorbell camera from the wall. It was impossible to tell if the threat of calling the police is what eventually got her to leave. But when she did, the man saw that she went to the house next door. This was when he actually called 911. The footage was absolutely bone-chilling. It was like a scene from a scary movie, and it wasn't possible to tell what she was holding behind her back because of the creepy way she backed away from the door to the sidewalk, still facing the doorbell camera the entire time. There were 2 or 3 other units on this now, driving around the area trying to find the woman. It was basically a mini manhunt now, and the description being used was possibly armed and dangerous woman. I checked the nearby houses on foot really quickly, then got back in my car and started patrolling the area as well. None of us could find the woman, and then we got a report of a breaking and entering nearby. Someone had called 911 to report that someone had entered their house with a weapon, and the caller was hiding in their bedroom upstairs. The caller also had a doorbell camera and was able to see the woman entering the house through the front door, but not before looking into the camera for a few moments again. I arrived to the house just about the same time as another unit. Entering the house was easy, as the front door was left unlocked, of course. We had to enter with caution though, with guns drawn, because we didn't know how dangerous this woman was, or what she could be armed with. As we entered and the foyer was clear, another officer and I shouted that the police were here, and we ordered the intruder to come out with her hands up. Then there was a scream for help from upstairs. My adrenaline was rushing, as it does in any situation like this involving armed suspects. We ran up the stairs and followed the screams for help. They led us to the master bedroom. The husband unlocked and opened the bedroom door as we got upstairs, the husband of the couple sitting and hiding in there. They hadn't left the bedroom since the woman had entered the house, and they said she had been clawing and banging at the door only a few minutes ago, and that they didn't hear her leave, let alone even go down the stairs. We had to check every other room in the upstairs for her, and in one of the corner bedrooms, in the pitch blackness, we heard a cackling sound. Not being able to see her, but to hear her, was downright spine-chilling. I flicked on the light to the bedroom, and she was there sitting on the bed, already looking at me and smiling. She had a huge knife in her hand, and there was blood soaking the bed sheets that she was sitting on. It was her blood. She had just cut one of her wrists. She started saying exactly what she was saying on the first guy's doorbell camera, that she needs blood. We didn't know who she meant, until noticing the little doll sitting between her legs. It was a little girl's doll, covered in the woman's blood. We yelled at her to drop the knife with our guns drawn on her. She just laughed and kept saying what she was saying. There was clearly something very wrong with her, and reasoning with her didn't seem like it would be possible, but we tried anyway. I asked her who is this she keeps referencing, and tried to talk nice to her, saying she doesn't have to hurt herself or anybody else, and that we're there to help her. But as she continued to stare at us, mainly at me, and laugh and keep muttering barely understandable sentences, I got increasingly nervous. I had my gun aimed at the giant knife in her hand, contemplating shooting it out of her hand, considering if that was a viable, safe option, but neither of us were expecting what happened next. The crazed woman sprang off the bed and made this growling sound as she was about to lunge at me and presumably attack me, as her knife was raised in the air. I reacted the only way I could in the moment, and I shot at her twice, both times hitting her in the arm, as even though I was still trying to have my sight aimed on the knife, I wasn't expecting her to just jump up suddenly. She dropped the knife and started to scream and cry as she grabbed her arm. We took this moment to subdue her and place her in cuffs. We had to get her an ambulance immediately before she'd bleed out. From the hospital, she'd later be transported to a local jail, and she was later found not guilty on all charges by reason of insanity. She's currently a patient at a mental asylum in my city. The horror that every party involved in this incident had to go through was unimaginable. From all the people who were scared to open their doors to a crazed woman welding something unknown behind her back, to the couple that actually almost fell victim to her in their own house, to myself and the other officer that were on the scene before she was in custody. It was the scariest experience of my 10 years being a police officer. Back around 2010 and 2011, when websites like Chat Roulette were popular, my friends and I would sometimes mess around with people on our webcam. The website usually peaked on weekend nights, and when we were like 14, we didn't really do much on weekend nights. So I had my friend Peter over, and we hopped on Chat Roulette. It was just my mom home, so we went upstairs with the laptop where we could be as loud as we wanted. We acted like two idiotic 14-year-olds, basically being mean and rude to anyone we saw. So basically on chat roulette, you'd press go and it would match you with someone else, anyone else using their webcam. Some girl who appeared to be a couple years older than us popped up. Her camera quality wasn't the best, and she was sitting in a dark room with a blue light filling a decent amount of it. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty tiny details over what Peter and I said to her, but we acted like douchey, mean teenage boys to be frank. Then Peter said, "Who is that behind you?" I suddenly looked beyond the girl to see what he was talking about. I didn't see anyone, so I caught on that he was joking. She seemed to know he was messing with her right away too, saying something along the lines of us being little dweebs. Peter insisted to the girl he was being serious, and I played along with it. The girl turned around, and like the two of us, she didn't see anyone behind her. All I could see behind her was the rest of the room, which appeared to be a mess, and her bed tucked in the corner of the room. Peter said there was someone hiding behind her bed. I looked at Peter, trying to hold in the laughter and make it seem like I was seeing what he was seeing too. Then I finally noticed someone in the background, by the back wall of the girl's room. He was coming out from behind the bed, seemingly trying to be inconspicuous. My smile disappeared as I then realized Peter wasn't joking around. I started telling her that someone was actually sneaking up behind her. Realistically, I assumed it was her brother or something messing with her, trying to scare her. So I said that. I said, "It looks like your brother is trying to scare you." She finally turned around, and her reaction was not what I was expecting at all. She screamed at the top of her lungs and jumped back out from her chair onto the desk, crawling backwards while frantically kicking her feet at the person approaching her. We could hear the sounds of books and other items falling from her desk as she kicked and screamed. Her webcam started to shake, as all we could see of her was her legs. The person in her room got in arm's reach of her, and now we could see a black mask over his face. He grabbed the girl and kept screaming, "Shut up," and her screams only got worse. Peter and I were silent now, simply staring, not knowing what to make of this. The man then looked into the webcam from behind his black mask for a second, and a few seconds later, the screen went dark, and we connected to another random person. Peter and I looked at each other. We closed out from the website and sat there to talk and take that in for a second. We agreed it was possible it could have been a prank. A lot of people on YouTube at the time played pranks on people on chat roulette to get some crazy reactions. But it looked real. Almost too real to be a performance. Well, a few days later, I got a text from Peter. It was a link to a news article about a teenage girl who had been murdered while home alone a few days back. We told our parents because we wanted to be able to give a description of what happened to the police. So our parents coordinated a time for us to sit down with the two investigators to explain everything we saw. We said we were on chat roulette with a blonde girl who looked either 16 or 17, and that some average-sized looking man wearing a black ski mask emerged from a back corner of her room and started to attack her on camera, but only for so long until he turned off the computer. We gave the best description we could. Whether they believed us or not, or whether the information helped or not, was something we honestly never found out. One winter night when I was 17, I came up with a brilliant idea of exploring the deep web after hearing all the craze about it. Everybody and their mother was claiming how the deep web was some dangerous, crazy part of the internet that nobody should ever go to. Others said these people didn't know what they were talking about, and that the deep web is actually extremely boring and uninteresting. I wanted to do some browsing out of curiosity. I needed to download a special web browser called Tor, which allowed you to visit websites ending with the .onion domain. When I had the browser, I didn't know where or how to start, so I googled where to start on the deep web, and that gave me a page full of archived links to the deep web. The page scrolled down forever, there must have been thousands of links. I finally decided to click on one. It was a .onion link that led to another archive of links. It took a while to load, but there I was, on another page of probably thousands of links. Only the background to this page was now black, and the links were red. I scrolled down until I found a link to a chat room. This also took forever to load, but I think it was called Backdoor Fire Chat or something. I put in a quick username, ABC1234, and I was entered into the chat. There appeared to be only 3 people in the chat, but messages from hours, even days before were still in the chat log. Most of the messages people left were links. Hardly anyone had been saying what the links led to, though. One of the other users, whose username was something ominous like username 157 or something, said something directed to me. He asked what I was looking for. I thought for a second, then typed out, "I'm looking for the darker part of the deep web." He didn't say anything for a minute. Then he posted a link. He didn't say what the link was to, so I asked. I waited another minute for him to respond, but instead he apparently signed out from the chat so that it was just me and one other person. So I clicked on the link, and I swear it had to have taken at least 2 minutes for the page to finally load. It was an unlabeled website with a black background and a banner at top with a picture of a living room with a red satanic symbol drawn on the table. All the text seemed to be written in some weird language. It seemed to be Hebrew characters. There were also a bunch of buttons, also written in whatever language this was at the top of the page. I clicked one of the middle buttons, and after a long loading time, a black chat room took over the screen. Messages with more of the Hebrew or whatever language filled the chat room. In one of the messages, though, 2 words stuck out that were written in text I could actually read. The words were my first and last name. I tried to exit the chat, but my mouse started to lag. Then the other user in the chat room posted a picture of my face. It was clearly taken just now through my webcam. Then he sent another and another. Constant pictures showing my horrified face basically frame by frame. I tried moving the mouse and clicking out of the browser, but it was frozen, and my computer just kept making the error noise as more messages I couldn't read were sent, as well as more pictures of my face. I pressed down the power button on the laptop for like 10 seconds, and it finally turned off. Even turning off the laptop seemed to take longer than usual. My heart was still racing though, and I still had goosebumps. I left my computer off for 12 hours and put a post-it note over my webcam from there on. I also deleted Tor and never visited the dark web again. Remember that little feature on the original Nintendo DS called Picto Chat? It was like a little chat room you could join with anyone else using a DS within a certain range. My house is right down the block from the town street in our neighborhood, what with all the pubs and festivities and such. When I was 12, the Nintendo DS was really in its prime, especially the Pokemon games. There was a spot in town down the block from me, tucked between a couple stores with a few benches that I'd walk to all the time to meet up with my friend Carl, so that we could battle in Pokemon usually. Actually, it was a spot where a lot of kids would be walking around with their DSs. One night, instead of playing Pokemon, Carl and I were just messing around on the Picto Chat feature, sending each other inappropriate pictures and dumb messages, laughing our asses off. I remember taking note of how much the leaves were starting to sway nearby, how the wind was apparently starting to pick up. Then, we both got the ding that would sound when someone else would enter the chat. It also said on the screen, "Now entering, Joe." Carl and I looked up at each other, smiling, because it was funny but weird that someone else had joined. We looked around our immediate surroundings, in that little square between buildings that we were sitting in, but it was a little dark to see anything outside of the light hanging from the side of one of the buildings, so we went along with it. I wrote "Hey Joe" with my stylus. He responded back with keyboard text saying "Hey." So Carl wrote with his stylus, "Where are you?" Joe sent back a message in more keyboard text, saying, "I see you." Carl and I looked up at each other once again, since it was obviously a strange thing for him to say. We looked around again. Joe sent another message saying, "You guys come here a lot, don't you?" I wrote back this time using the keyboard instead of free draw, saying, "Yeah, who are you and where are you?" Then, this Joe person sent a picture. It was some squiggly, fluffy looking object. My first guess was that it was a cloud. I typed back, "Is that a cloud?" Joe said no, guess again. I typed back why. He typed back, "It's where I'm hiding." For the third time, Carl and I exchanged glances. Carl screamed out finally, "Who's out there?" I looked back down at the DS and saw another picture from Joe. It was similar to his last picture, but more detailed. I sent my second guess. "Is it a bush?" I said. Then I heard a chuckle. It sounded like right on top of me. I knew Carl heard it too, because we once again looked at one another. But then, I saw his eyes focus on something behind me. I turned and saw some guy slowly standing up from a big bush that sat behind my bench. He towered over me, and as he looked down at me, he had on a very wide smile. I remember his teeth were small and his gums took up most of his smile. Then he put both his hands on my shoulders, not in a gentle way. He grabbed my shoulders and squeezed them with a tight grip, and I screamed. Carl and I ran for our bikes, and as I initially started to pedal, desperately trying to pick up speed, I heard the clonking of the man's footsteps behind us. Thankfully, we picked up enough speed and got back into public view on the road, and only then did I look back. The man wasn't following us. We went straight to my house and told my mom and dad, who forbid me from going to town alone at night anymore. They called Carl's parents to recommend they do the same to their son. Even if they hadn't put that restriction on me, there's no way I would have ever gone back to that spot at night. It actually freaks me out to wonder how many times that guy had to have watched us on our DS's to have known when to come, and with one of his own.
In late October, my girlfriend Stacy and I took a road trip to Stowe, Vermont. We rented a cabin on the website Glamming Hub, only about a 20-minute ride from the village. It was on a nice hilltop with a view of the fall foliage, which was just the reason why we took this trip. We had the rental from Thursday night to Sunday. The cabin had a code lock system. The owner sent me the combination before we arrived, and it worked seamlessly. Stepping in, we looked around the place, and it was nice and cozy. Literally everything was made of wood, and it had this very old-fashioned country feel. It even had this distinct smell that just reminded us of, well, I guess a country log cabin. There was a bathroom, a small kitchen, 3 bedrooms, and a living room. It was plenty of space for the two of us. There were 2 TVs, one in the master bedroom and one in the living room. There was this other door that was locked though, which we presumed led to the 3rd bedroom that was listed on the ad. Though we didn't know why it would be locked, it wasn't a big deal at all, and we presumed the owner had some personal stuff in there. Plus, he knew it would only be us 2. We put most of our luggage in the 2nd bedroom so that we could leave the master bedroom nice and neat. Since we arrived pretty late on Thursday, we went straight out to dinner in town. Then we walked around the village for a little bit before returning to the cabin. By then it was late, so we called it a night after a movie. The next day was a cloudy, chilly one. We went out to hike along some dirt trails in the woods near the cabin, which was very peaceful. Upon returning to the cabin, I showered and changed out of my hiking attire and into more appropriate attire for hitting a nice restaurant. When I got out from the shower, Stacy told me she heard something in the bedroom with a locked door. She said it sounded like a radio or recording. I went up to the door and put my ear up on it to try and listen, but it was silent on the other side. I knocked on the door to the dismay of Stacy. She told me to stop because the idea of me knocking on the door trying to see if someone was in there freaked her out. To be honest, I slightly did it for that reason, just to tease her. While Stacy was in the shower, I was sitting in the living room watching whatever I could find on the TV. That's when I thought, just barely, I heard the slightest sound from inside that room. I muted the TV and went to put my ear over the door again. I did hear this slight speaking noise, like it could be from a radio. I messaged and then called the host and told him about it. He said he wasn't sure why his wife would have locked the door, but that she may have left some of her stuff in there. He said as for the speaker noise, he'd have to ask his wife. Stacy and I went out for lunch after her shower. I didn't tell her about hearing the noise as well because I didn't want to creep her out, and it was obvious to me the guy's wife just left an electronic device in there or something. We went to this restaurant on Main Street in town called Harrison's. After that, we just took a drive around the area, then stopped at a park and relaxed for a bit.
That's when the host called me and said that his wife told him she didn't lock anything in there, so he's not sure why that is or what we could be hearing. He offered to come by and unlock the door and check it out, to which I said sure. So with that, we headed back to the house. It was about a 20-minute drive back. When we got back, Stacy let herself in and collapsed on the couch, tired from, I guess, eating and walking around. I listened into the room again, and I still heard the same sounds from before. I said, "Hang on, I'll be right back," to Stacy as I walked outside. I didn't know why I didn't think of doing this sooner. I went to the window to the bedroom with a locked door. There were no curtains or anything blocking the view inside. As I stood on my tiptoes to look into the room, I was horrified. I saw this grossly skinny, tall, 20-something-year-old guy in a hood dancing slowly in the center of the room. He had what looked to be a small radio in his hand. He noticed me quickly at the window, and he stopped and looked at me, smiling. I started screaming Stacy's name, yelling, "Get out of the house." She met me at the door, panicked and confused. I told her just get in the car. I grabbed our 2 bags, leaving whatever stray items behind, and threw them in the trunk, driving off. I then called the host and told him to call the cops because someone was in the house. An hour later, while we were sitting in town, I got a call back from the host who said police arrived and the 3rd bedroom was opened and no one was in there. However, they found multiple empty bags of chips under the bed, implying someone was in fact in there. We went back to collect our remaining belongings and worked out a refund between the host and the website. Of course, we didn't stay there after that. We went to a nearby motel and stayed till Sunday, then we went home. I'll tell you though, what I saw through that window, that dancing skinny figure, I couldn't sleep for nights, especially with the thought that he was in there the entire time we were, even while we were asleep. It happened after a long Friday night halfway through October, a rainy one, and drinks were involved. I was at this Halloween-themed housewarming party with all my friends. I didn't wear a costume because I came straight from work already pretty exhausted. I took an Adderall to wake myself up before going, and I stopped at a gas station to pick up some White Claws. There were a decent amount of people there, I'd say 25 to 30. I had to meet a few people that I'd never met before. All this socializing and drinking was keeping me awake, but deep down I kind of wanted to just get home and go to bed. Working in a hospital means I get crazy hours and my sleep schedule's all over the place. I eventually saw a good opportunity to do an Irish goodbye through the backyard. I didn't even really have it in me to say goodbye to 20 people. I really shouldn't have driven home with alcohol in my system, and I don't recommend anybody ever do that. Always call an Uber. I ran through the rain and got in my Subaru and just started to drive. No music on, I wasn't in the mood. I just wanted peace and quiet, to listen to the rain hitting the windshield. Then, driving down some quiet residential road, I spotted a girl walking in the rain. No umbrella, no jacket, nothing. She stopped walking and looked at my car as I drove nearer to her. I definitely let out a sigh as I contemplated whether I should just keep going or not, and my more compassionate side told me to pull over. I rolled down my window and asked if she needed a ride. Without answering, she got in the back seat of my car. I asked her where she was going. She said just down to the end of this road, so that's where I took her. As I stopped at the second stop sign, I asked her why she's out in the rain. She said she was just in a hurry back and didn't want to call a cab. I said that's understandable, making a joke about how expensive cabs and Ubers are. I introduced myself as Jake, and she said, "Allie, thanks for picking me up." After that, no more words were exchanged. I continued down the street until I saw a dead-end sign approaching. I stopped at the final sign, then asked, "Is it past the dead-end sign?" She didn't answer. As I was halfway through that little intersection, I looked in the rearview mirror, and my heart sank. She wasn't in the reflection. I stomped on the brake and turned around. She wasn't in the back seat. I quickly pulled to the side of the road and got out. I hurried to check the entire back seat row. She wasn't there. Not on the seat, not on the floor. I looked down the empty road, lit up only by the occasional streetlight. There was no one in sight, but there was no possible way she even got out from the car, as I had not once heard the door either opening or closing, and there's no possible way she just snuck out from the car unheard. I was starting to question my sanity. I started feeling around the seat and floor where she sat. It was completely dry. It would have had to have been somewhat wet from her after being in the rain. I stood there in the rain, dumbfounded, confused, and scared. I looked around me again, and then I realized to the right of the car, right next to where I pulled over, was a fence, and beyond that fence was a cemetery. And her response to my question moments before dawned on me when I asked her, "Where are you going?" And she said, "Down to the end of this road." I looked at the cemetery, which was at the end of the road. Then I got back in my car and did a 3-point turn and hurried home. I don't think I was anywhere near drunk enough to be hallucinating shit.
Last October, my friends and I went to a haunted corn maze in Oak Hill, Ohio. It was supposed to be the best corn maze in our area. I want to leave the name out just out of respect for the family that runs it. I was with my friends Joe, Carl, and Cody. We always do haunted house type stuff every October. On the line to get into the attraction, we overheard some kids saying how last year the maze had to shut down for a night because some kid was actually hurt by one of the workers. We joined in on the conversation, and apparently someone dressed in one of the costumes actually pushed one of the customers and they had to close for the night. I guess that added a little bit to the nerves, like that maybe we'd feel like the costume actors would actually go above and beyond just the typical jump scares. Once we got in, it felt like a normal corn maze. It started slow, then the occasional actors would jump out from behind a corner or out of the crops. There were multiple speakers tucked away in the background, blasting spooky sound effects to add to the ambiance, and it overall was just littered with Halloween decorations and props everywhere. We came to this little split. There were 2 directions we could go, left and right, and there was a sign in the middle with 2 arrows. Left side said "this way to safety," and the right side said "danger, keep out." So 2 and 2, we decided to split up. Cody and I went to the left, the safety side. As we walked, we expected it to be the opposite of safety, that this side would probably be the scarier side or have more jump scares. Well, turns out that was right. Kind of. We turned this corner, and there was this guy in a costume just standing there holding a pumpkin. The costume was very bizarre. It was an all-black outfit with this weird blank mask over his face. It was a complete pullover mask, but it only had 2 eye holes. No mouth hole, not even holes for the nose. He didn't jump out or make any screaming noises. He just walked up to us holding up the pumpkin, motioning for us to take it. We kinda just laughed, thinking it was part of the gimmick. Then, in a deep, raspy voice, almost like how Batman speaks in the Dark Knight movies, like he were masking his voice, he said, "Take it, please." We looked at him continuing to laugh while moving forward, and he started to follow us, repeating himself over and over, saying, "Take it." Eventually it seemed like it was getting a little stale though, like the joke was over and he should have stopped and went back to his spot. But he kept following us for over a minute. He kept saying, "Take it, take it," his tone getting angrier sounding. Then he said, "Take it or I'll kill you." Now I didn't take that seriously, obviously, given that we were in a corn maze, but I did find it to be a little aggressive of a line. I took the pumpkin from him, and he seemed to stop following us. We continued walking until we bumped into Joe and Carl again at the point where the 2 separate paths merged, and they both laughed, asking why I was holding a pumpkin. I explained. Everyone agreed I should just take the pumpkin home with me at this point. Anyway, continuing on through the corn maze, it was a pretty traditional standard attraction after that. At one point though, one of the actors actually broke character and came up to me and said I can't steal the pumpkin. I told him one of the workers gave it to me, and he asked which one. I said the guy in the black with the white blank mask. He seemed confused and asked where the worker was. I told him on the left side of the fork in the path. He then walked in that direction, not saying anything. We all thought it was really weird and took us out of the immersion a little bit. Quickly after that, we made it to the end, and it was only then, when there was enough light, that I realized the pumpkin was carved on the inside, and the top of it was cut. I grabbed it by the stem and pulled off the top, expecting something to be in there. And oh, there was. On the bottom of the inside of the pumpkin, at first I didn't know what they were. To be honest, I thought they were some kind of food, till I picked one up. I realized it was a severed human finger, a very real one, and there were probably 9 more in there. On the side of the pumpkin was a pair of eyes drawn in black Sharpie, and under them said, "Always watching," with a smiley face next to it. My friends and I screamed and freaked out, and we ran to the nearest worker. She didn't know what to do either, as she was just as young as us. She called for one of her superiors, and he called the police. The whole attraction was shut down as police came and basically listened to our story.
We stayed on the premises while police searched the place, but it was basically in the middle of nowhere, so he could have been anywhere. The police took the appendages for, I'm assuming, forensic analysis. I don't think a body was ever found to match the fingers. We left that place unharmed that night, but not without a permanently traumatizing experience. This happened when I was 12 years old, an age old enough to be aware of my surroundings and have a pretty good sense of danger, but also still around that age that attracts a certain selection of creeps. We live in a decently busy neighborhood. However, we're on a dead-end block near a forest preserve, and across the street from us is a sump, and if you were to go through the forest preserve, you would find yourself in a small community park. There was this one Saturday night that a mini carnival was being held in the park, and since I wasn't doing anything with friends, my mom suggested that I go check out the carnival. She isn't the kind of mom who tells her kids not to go out past dark. She always let me do my own thing. So I did end up going. I crossed through the forest with a flashlight and eventually passed the fence that led to the park and saw lit up carnival rides everywhere. A Ferris wheel, a mini roller coaster, some of those big spinning rides, and of course concession stands and carnival game booths. It was late enough where it wasn't very crowded. There was also a big circus tent with the red and white stripes where I saw some people entering. I poked my head inside, where I saw 4 rows of people in the audience, and on this mini stage were 3 clowns performing tricks. One was on a tricycle, one was juggling, and the other was just dancing around. Then the dancing one noticed me poking my head inside the tent, and he skipped over closer to me and started waving his index finger, signaling for me to come closer, or to come onto the stage. I didn't really know. All I knew is I didn't want to do either, and so I walked away. I ran into a friend at one of the carnival games, and I hung out with him for about half an hour. Pretty soon the carnival was closing down and everybody was starting to leave. I said goodbye to my friends and made my way towards the woods again. I was near the fence when I heard, "Psst." It came from behind me. It was one of the clowns. The clown that was waving me over earlier. He asked me if I wanted to check out the backstage area of the circus tent and some of the cool things the guests cannot see. I said no very quickly and walked into the forest, looking back every few seconds to make sure I wasn't being followed. And I wasn't. The clown just stood there watching me, with the painted-on smile on his face making the situation even more disturbing. When I was out of view, I began to run for a bit before I was confident he wouldn't be able to find me. I was not going to tell my mom what happened because I loved being allowed out whenever I wanted, and I feared that this might ruin that. It's a half-mile walk through the woods. I was probably 3/4 of the way there when I heard it again. Psst. This time, I immediately felt sick when I heard it. I turned and saw the same clown walking out from the darkness of the woods into the light of my flashlight. When he was close enough, I threw the flashlight at him and ran for it in the direction of my house. I heard him close behind me until the road was visible. Then I heard him turn around. When I got home, I was breathing like I had just run a marathon, and my mom was of course concerned. I still didn't want to tell her what happened, so I lied and said I jogged the whole way back. After that, it never came up again. Up until the age of 14, I always had a fear of clowns, ever since I was first greeted with one at the age of 5 at a county fair. On a cold Tuesday night in November during break, my parents were on vacation and my sister and brother were out for the night. My friend, who I'll refer to as B, wanted to come over so that we could walk to the fair a couple blocks away. So he did. We walked to the fair, which happened to be in a big empty parking lot. We walked around for a little while and played some of the carnival games. Then we ran into a clown. He didn't speak, he just smiled, bopped around, and made silly hand motions. He resembled more of a mime than a clown, and he seemed to inch his way closer to us every few seconds. Me and B laughed, B patted him on the shoulder, and we walked away. "That was weird," I told B. "That was more creepy than weird," said B. We were walking back to my house now on the sidewalks of the quiet Tuesday night neighborhood roads, and that's when we heard something from behind us. It was a pair of footsteps. We turned, but didn't see anyone. This continued for another few minutes. B said he was freaked out and was gonna go home, but I convinced him to stay with me and hang out at my place, honestly because I was scared now. We were sure we were being followed. We made it to the front of my house. I dug through my pocket, took out my keychain, and started looking for the right key out of the 3 in the dark. That's when B nudged me to turn around. There was a clown hiding in the next door neighbor's bushes, and he was staring at us. When he noticed that we had spotted him, he emerged from the bushes and started walking over to us. I began to panic, trying each of the 3 keys until the door finally opened. We entered and slammed the door behind us. I called my parents right away, who told us to arm ourselves and hide upstairs. We went up to my little brother's room and looked out the window. There was the clown standing in our driveway, looking up at the window we were standing at, as if he were waiting for us. I shut the blinds and we both ducked down. Breathing heavily and panicking, within 10 minutes, he was gone. I guess he gave up, or at least we think he was gone. For all we knew, he could have been hiding somewhere on the property all night. I'm just happy we made it home in time. If you've seen the news lately, there have been many reports of clowns luring children into the forest. I was one of the first to experience this, and it was utterly terrifying. I want to remain anonymous at the moment, just in case the clown finds out who I am. Anyways, here's what happened. I am 14 years old and live in a small town in South Carolina. The town has a population of around 130 people. Summer was just about over, and I had a summer job working at the local lumber yard. It was a great place to work. I helped customers load lumber into their vehicles, a pretty mindless job. Plus, I was able to stay physically fit because of it. The best part is that my house is exactly 1 mile away. Walking to and from work is a daily occurrence. I spent a long day hauling and moving lumber, and my workday was pretty much complete. It was about 9:30 p.m. when I started to walk home. The moon was just starting to light up the road, and the sun had completely set below the hills. There are no other houses between the lumberyard and my house. Our town is very rural. The road home has hills that peak high enough that you're unable to see what's on the other side until you crest it. The road is skinny with no shoulder, but it was freshly paved. The trees stack one by one behind each other in a row, and vegetation is thick with a few game trails coming out to the road. Crickets and frogs sound like an orchestra. The walk home usually takes about 30 minutes. I've done it so many times that I entertain myself with music. I put in my earbuds, throw on some tunes, and away I went. I was about halfway home when I heard what sounded like a high-pitched cackling laugh. What the hell was that? I said to myself out loud. I took out my earbuds and stopped. I thought maybe it was part of the music, but something about it didn't fit into the song. I stood there motionless, looking to hear the same sound again. However, the frogs croaking were so loud that not even a scream could be heard. I thought nothing of it and walked home. The next day, I started my shift at 2 p.m. I started my walk to work around 1:30. Nothing was out of the ordinary. It was a beautiful day. I usually look down at my feet and kick any rocks that I see. Having them skip across the fresh pavement was oddly satisfying. I kicked a rock and it skipped across the pavement and landed next to something strange laying in the dirt on the side of the road. It looked to be a bright red ball. I picked it up, I gave it a little pressure, and it squeaked. Immediately, I knew what it was. This is a clown nose, I said to myself. What the hell is this doing out here? I kept it and carried it to work to show the other staff members. I even put it on and gave it some honks. It got a few laughs. The day went on as usual, and around 9:30 p.m. I clocked out and began my long walk home. I forgot my earbuds at home, so I was unable to listen to my usual music. While on my way home, I was able to make out a faint image of a figure about 150 yards away of what looks like a deer standing in the middle of the road. It was hard to make out as the fog hovered over the ground and the moonlight backlit the animal. As I got within 100 yards, it must have gotten spooked. I could see a rough outline scamper back into the forest. Little did I know this was not a deer, but something more sadistic. I passed the spot in which the deer had taken off back into the woods. As I walked by, I heard footsteps about 20 yards behind me. I thought this was strange, as I have never seen a deer come back onto the road once it was scared off. Before I could look back, I heard, "Hey there." I turned my head to see a clown standing in the middle of the road with his hands behind his back. He wore baggy pants and a baggy shirt that was obviously meant to be a clown costume, but it was very dirty. So dirty that the colors faded into stains. His makeup ran down his face and his eyes were black. He tilted his head to the side and said, "You have something of mine. I need it back." He gave a small little laugh after he spoke. I don't have anything of yours," I said as I started to walk backwards. My house was still a quarter-mile away. This is when the situation went from odd to terrifying. He said, "Well then, if you don't have my nose, I'm gonna need yours." He pulled something out from behind his back, and I'm not gonna lie, it looked like a machete. I turn around, and with all my might, I take off running down the middle of the road. I could hear his bare feet running. I didn't look back as it could slow me down. The blades of what I assumed were two machetes dragged on the asphalt. I was in great shape, but I could still hear his footsteps getting louder, signaling he was getting closer to me. He would even let out a little giggle that would feed my adrenaline even more. My lungs started to burn. I began to crest the hill. At this moment, I could hear him almost right behind me, just about touching me. And then out of nowhere, a truck crests the hill with its headlights shining on me. I waved my arms in sheer panic. He stopped. I quickly looked behind me to see nothing. No clown. I tell the man in the truck what happened, and he called the police. I will never make that walk again. I have no idea how the clown got to that location and why he waited for me. I have never seen any vehicles parked there, nor are there any other houses besides mine for miles. This was my worst nightmare come true. Now I have found out that this is happening to more people, clowns hiding in the woods and stalking people. Is this a cult? A group of scary clowns with a goal to terrify people? I have no idea, but I do know that I'll never be able to walk in the dark or see clowns the same way again.
What you're about to hear is the scariest thing I'd ever experienced. My sister and her husband were going away to Hawaii for a week. So since I'm the second oldest, she asked me to watch my 2-year-old nephew Sean for the duration. 2 was a tricky age for me because Sean was still in diapers at the time, and changing diapers was the last thing I'd ever want to be doing. Still, family is family, and I had to return a favor to them anyway. I was sleeping in the guest bedroom upstairs for the duration, and by the 3rd day I had everything down to a rhythm. Wake up, feed him, do my work in the living room while supervising him as he played, feeding him again, then putting him to bed. My sister has a high-tech baby monitor that connects to a touchscreen tablet. It records sound and video from above Sean's crib and feeds it to the tablet. I would keep that by my side while he slept, no matter where I was, the living room, the bedroom, anywhere. Midday most of the time he'd get sleepy and I'd bring him to his crib to take a nap. By like the 4th day, Sean was taking a nap, so I was in the backyard sitting at my sister's outdoor bar on my laptop. I had the baby monitor placed on the bar, so I was able to easily hear Sean start to laugh at something. I checked the tablet, and I saw him standing in his crib, so I guessed it was time to take him out. I went up to his room and grabbed him to bring him outside in the yard with me.
where he drove around in his little electric toy car. For basically the rest of the day, I just watched Sean play with his toys while I would either be doing work on my laptop or just watching something on TV. Shortly after dinner time, I changed him one last time and put him into his crib. An hour or so passed, and there really wasn't much else for me to do. I wasn't interested in anything playing on TV, so I went upstairs to the guest bedroom to put an end to the night. Laying in bed in the dark, the room suddenly lit up from the tablet on the bedside table. I heard Sean laughing again. The tablet would light up if any significant amount of motion or sound was detected. I was comfortable in my position. I didn't really want to move. But when the screen suddenly went dark, yet I could still hear Sean's laughs, I got confused. I picked up the tablet, and all I saw was black. Yet, in a way, it seemed as though the screen was still on. I heard Sean say the word "yeah" as he continued laughing. Something wasn't right. I set the tablet down and began walking to Sean's room, calling his name as I was on my way. I got to his room, and he was standing in his crib. I asked him why he was awake and who he was talking to. He then tried reaching for something atop the crib, but his short arms couldn't reach it. It seemed he was going for the camera for the baby monitor. So I pointed at it and said, "Camera?" And he replied, "Yeah." I picked him up to give him a little lift to see what he was trying to do with the camera. And as I lifted him, he used his little thumb to cover the camera lens. My heart sank as I put the pieces together. The reason the tablet went dark was because it was being covered by someone, but I knew it wasn't Sean based on the fact that he couldn't reach it. "Sean, is someone in here?" I asked him, and in response he pointed to the closet. I picked him up and ran outside to the neighbor's house, pounding on the door screaming for help. An elderly woman answered, and she let me call the police with her phone. She was already clearly close with Sean, and because of that she seemed a lot more comforting. Police showed up and said when they checked the upstairs closet it was open, but no one was inside. The fact that it was open alone says everything. Someone was in Sean's closet that night. They must have made an escape when I took Sean and ran. The officers told me to stay at someone else's place for the night, and the elderly woman next door allowed us to sleep there. The next few nights after that, I watched Sean at my apartment. My sister and her husband cut the trip short, of course, after hearing the news. I was a 10-year-old diabetic who lived on the second-story floor. My parents lived on the first floor. That night, my dad was watching a scary movie about aliens. The aliens took over the world and were controlling people with their minds. I was unable to sleep in the room that I shared with my sister that night, so instead I slept on the first-story floor with my parents. At that time, my parents were using a baby monitor to make sure I didn't need any help in the middle of the night to take care of my diabetes. Late that night, as my parents and I fell asleep, I heard my mother's voice over the baby monitor. She said, "Amanda, honey, come give me a kiss. I'm going to work." In a confused daze, I looked outside to see it was pitch black. That's weird, I go to myself. Isn't it too late for my mom to be going to work? I rub the sleep out of my eyes as I make my way upstairs. The door to my sister's room cracks open, but my mom isn't in there. My sister is sound asleep on her bed, and the curtain just drifts open. I look around for my mom, but still can't find her. I make my way fast down the stairs and back into my parents' room, where my mom sat up and went, "What are you doing up?" I said, "Didn't you just ask me to come upstairs to give you a kiss goodbye?" She looks at me funny. "No, why would I say that?" she said. I looked at the baby monitor and said, "You didn't hear that?" She looked at me funny and says, "Go back to sleep." I lay on the floor shaking, thinking about what just happened. In my teens and early 20s, I would babysit as my side hustle. I was always really good with toddlers and babies, and usually the parents of the really young ones would pay more. There was this one pair of kids named Lucas and Adriana. Lucas was 2 and Adriana was 7, though Adriana doesn't have much to do with this story, I'll just say that right now. Lucas didn't really speak much, though I was told he had only just turned 2 a few weeks ago at the time. After a long and stressful day of watching the kids, they went to sleep. I would be spending the night at this couple's house watching their kids while they were out in some beach town with friends or something. When the kids finally went to sleep, I had some peace and quiet and time to unwind, as watching the 2 of them was a lot. I lay in the living room watching a movie. The couple actually still had a baby monitor for Lucas's room, and they asked me to keep that in earshot when he went to sleep. I left it on the coffee table in the living room. Eventually, I ended up on a FaceTime call with my friend, and that ate away so much time that by the end of it, it was past 12. I went to sleep after that. Actually, I fell asleep pretty easily. The next thing I remember was the dream. The freaky, disturbing, messed up dream. Everyone knows dreams can be weird and grainy, so I can't describe verbatim what happened in this dream. But the best I can remember, I somehow had lost the baby monitor and Lucas was missing. After searching through this weird dream version of the couple's house, I found the baby monitor under the bed, and on the screen was Lucas's dead body. And upon seeing that, a deep voice kept saying this was your fault. I must have heard it like 3 times before I suddenly woke up. After realizing it was just a dream, I remembered the baby monitor. I left it on the coffee table downstairs, but before going down to get it, I figured I'd check Lucas's room first since it was closer anyway, and I saw he was fast asleep. After that, I went downstairs to get the device and went back up to the room I was staying in. I went back to sleep, but once again, I woke up sometime later. But this time, I woke up to the little monitor device beeping and the red light flashing. I picked it up, and on the screen was Lucas standing up looking directly into the camera. Not smiling or laughing, just looking dead set into the camera, his eyes glowing in the night vision. The way he was looking freaked me out. It was a cause for concern, so I rushed over to his room. But when I got to his room, he was fast asleep, laying on his back. I said his name a few times and lightly shook him, but he didn't wake up. I looked around the room, scared, feeling like there was another presence in there with us. I checked the closet and looked under the crib. No one. I went back to the other bedroom and looked at the monitor again, and it showed Lucas laying flat in his crib. I turned it off for the night, but I didn't sleep as easily after that. To this day, I still don't understand that dream I had, or if it was some kind of warning, and I don't know what exactly I was seeing on that baby monitor screen. I just don't know what to believe was actually real. One questionable activity my old friends and I would partake in when we were young was ding-dong ditch, where you run up to someone's door, knock or ring the bell, then run away or hide. We'd do it from time to time when we were feeling mischievous or bored. At the time, someone moved across the street from my friend Stefan, who lived a block down from me. He kept telling us how sketchy it seemed. No one would ever see them leave their house, the blinds were always closed at every window, and there were never any lights on. Yet there was always a red Toyota pickup truck in the driveway all hours of the day. No one really seemed to know who was living there or what they looked like. So one night we thought it would be a good idea to target it while we were out ding-dong ditching. My friend Jake and I hid behind a nearby car while Stefan ran up to the door. We could tell he rang the bell like 5 times, and we chuckled because of it. He finally ran for cover in a bush separating that property from the neighboring property. We waited for the door to open, but alas, it never did. So Stefan ran back to the door and rang it a bunch more times, probably closer to like 10 rings this time. As he ran for his same hiding spot, I noticed the curtains to one of the front windows move a little bit. I didn't see anyone's face, but that confirmed someone was inside the house. The door never opened, but Jake and I were afraid to yell over to him not to do it again. Stefan never looked over at us, so he never even gave us a chance to wave at him to stop there. He waited half a minute before going back to the door, but I swear before he could even ring the bell, the door pulled open, and all Jake and I saw was someone's arm reach out from the house to grab Stefan. He screamed a high-pitched scream like a girl. Jake and I looked at each other with horrified looks on our faces. Stefan managed to break free from the grip, and continued screaming as he ran past us across the street to his house. The front door to the house slammed shut. No one came out chasing after us. We followed Stefan to his house, and as soon as we got inside, I told him that was a horrible idea. Now that person would know they were neighbors. But he said he didn't care. He told his parents about it, who at first were mad at us, but sounded a bit concerned after some explaining about the aggressive way the man inside the house tried pulling him in. Still, neither of his parents wanted to go knock on the door, considering we were ding-dong ditching after all. Jake went home. I stayed over Stefan's house to sleep over. His parents always complained about us being too loud after they went to sleep, so we hung out in his backyard. We were playing Pokemon on our DSs for a while and talked more about what happened across the street. He said he didn't see much of the man's face and he was pretty well hidden behind the door, but he could tell it was a man by his veiny hands and strength. The man grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, so Stefan was able to free himself from the man's grip pretty easily. At some point while in the yard, I remember hearing a thump kind of noise. But I didn't even feel like it was worth bringing up to Stefan. I just made a mental note of it, and maybe he did too, who knows. Eventually it got too chilly to sit outside anymore, and we were getting a little tired, so we went back inside. We noticed it was a lot chillier on the first floor than it had been before we went outside. Stefan realized why fairly quickly. The sliding dining room window was open all the way, and a breeze of cold air was pouring in, but his parents definitely didn't open that. Something wasn't right. There was the sound of a footstep or something falling on the carpeted floor above us, in Stefan's room. It set him off screaming for his parents. The house has a very open layout, so of course they heard him and came rushing out of their room, confused and worried as hell. We pointed at the open window, then said someone's in his room upstairs. His dad ran downstairs to grab the biggest kitchen knife they had and ran back upstairs as we all waited in fear for something to happen upstairs. His mom hugged us and tried to comfort us while she called the police. Stefan's dad started to scream. Not like a scared scream or a scream out of pain, but more so an angry scream. We waited downstairs until the cops showed up, and they went up to Stefan's room. What actually happened is so disturbing. As anyone could guess, the break-in point was the window. Stefan's dad checked his son's room and heard something in the closet. Upon opening it, someone tried to lunge at him, but he immediately got one good stab in the person. What we found out minutes later was that it was the neighbor from across the street. How we knew was because Stefan instantly recognized the white sleeves he was wearing and the scabs on his hand. The man was as scary looking as we imagined. Stefan's family got a restraining order against the man and refused to live across the street from him any longer. They moved within a few months to a house in the same town. This is a story that happened a few days ago. My friends and I really like to do some crazy things such as ding-dong ditching, which is what we were doing on Friday night. I'll refer to my friends as C, B, E, A, and Ben. There was this one corner house on an opening to a cul-de-sac. My friend E said I should ring the bell, so I did it because I was not the kind of person to not do something just because I might get in trouble for it. So I walked up to the stoop and knocked on the door and ran. We ran maybe 3 houses down behind a car so we could still get a good view of the house we just did. The guy came outside, walked around, and I think spotted either myself, E, or Ben, so he screamed "hey" at us, and we ran like normal if this happened. We all laughed it off like we usually would. Then we all agreed like a bunch of idiots that we would do the same house again. So we walked around the street to the house, and we all debated who should ring. I didn't because I just did like the last 3 houses. So we all agreed Ben should do it. So there went Ben up to the door, knocked, and ran. C, B, and A were on the corner of the street along with Ben after he rang, while me and E were behind a car right across the street from the house. It was like he was waiting right at the door, because because only about 5 seconds after Ben rang the bell, he came sprinting outside. He got to the bottom of his driveway and screamed, "Hey, come here now." That was my cue to run, so I sprinted as fast as I could to the corner and around the block. I kept on sprinting until I caught up to Ben, C, A, and B. We had walked about the whole street gathering our thoughts when A pointed out that E was missing. We all looked at each other, obviously very worried for him. We called him and he picked up out of breath and was demanding us to go back to the house because he was chasing him. So we went about halfway down the street, still on the phone with E, and then he dropped the bomb. The man had a gun. We knew this because E said he heard the man scream, "I'm gonna blow your fucking brains out." I actually began to tear up, and we were all very worried for E. After about 5 minutes of E telling us to go back to the house, we made it to A's backyard and waited for E to make it back. He was saying he was very close, so we walked out of the backyard and there he was. We all hugged him and were so grateful he was okay. We all went to A's backyard afterwards to talk about what happened. The first thing E said was that he got the whole thing on video, so he showed us.
Hey, come here now! Come here now! Come here!
So what happened that I was completely unaware of was that when I ran away from behind the car, the man started chasing me. Then E apparently got up and ran the opposite way, kind of putting the man in a pickle as to who he wanted to go after. He chose E, and he ran from him almost all the way down the street before hiding under a car until he felt it was safe to run back. This was the most insane night of my life, and I couldn't thank E enough, because if it weren't for him, who knows what that guy would have done to me if he had caught up. I was a very sheltered child, and I didn't really start going out until college, really. High school, I kind of never really went out much, so when the opportunity to do something slightly rebellious came about, I would jump on it. My cousin Rob, who was infinitely cooler than me, would hang out with me in my days before college. He'd always be down to go out and get into trouble. There was this one time he called me and told me to meet him at his house. We'd be going ding-dong ditching. I brought along my flashlight just because it was dark and there weren't many streetlights in my old neighborhood. He also brought along 2 walkie-talkies and handed me one. Houses were also a little further between than your typical suburb. Rob led the way down the road, yelling things, hitting stop signs with his hands. He always had a lot more energy than me. We veered off the street and cut through some trees onto someone's property. There was nothing but a single walkway lamp on. No lights on inside or outside the house. Rob told me to run around back and wait for his signal to ring the backyard bell. He was trying to make the homeowner run back and forth, not knowing where to go. We tested the walkie-talkies and they were all good. I waited in the backyard of this property. It was extremely dark and quiet back there. To be honest, I was really scared. Rob gave the go-ahead to ring right after he rang the bell a bunch of times. I rang it twice, then ran for cover behind a bush. I waited in that bush and walkie-talkied Rob, seeing if anyone had come out front. Negative. I told him it was looking the same in the back. After a minute, he told me to go to the back door. I looked into the huge back window to see if I could see inside. There was this tall-looking piece of furniture right in front of the window, and there was this red flashing light in one corner of the room. That was about all I could see. Rob rang the bell a bunch of times again. I heard it from where I was crouching. It was my turn. I rang the bell a couple times, which, yes, had a different sound, so you could distinguish the two. I ran back to my bush and waited again. Rob said over the walkie-talkie that nothing was happening. It was the same on my end. Why wasn't anyone answering? But I did think I could see something moving from inside the window, though. Something small. I told Rob over the walkie-talkie. He said I should just check it out with my flashlight. So, trying to be cool, I did. I flicked on the light as I got closer to the back window, and when the light shone through the window, it revealed that tall object on the other side of the window wasn't a piece of furniture. It was some creepy-looking smiling man, and the thing I saw moving was his waving hand. He walked away from the window at an unsettlingly quick speed and arrived at the back door. He opened it and started approaching me with this horrific speed-walking kind of pace, as he was asking me to come inside. I dropped the walkie-talkie and screamed and ran for Rob. He met me in the front of the house, and we saw the man from the back quickly approaching the two of us in the same speed-walking pace. What made it even worse was he didn't say anything else. We ran back to Rob's house, whose parents were already asleep. We were catching our breath in his basement when the beep of the walkie-talkie went off. There was a breathing from the other walkie-talkie, then an old man's voice whispering, "Where are you kids? I'm not gonna hurt you, I just want to give you your walkie-talkie." The fact that the frequency was reaching us in a basement meant he was close. That was the scariest part. We turned off the walkie-talkie out of fear and turned off all the lights. In case you're thinking this was some sweet innocent man trying to be nice, there's no chance. He was literally chasing us, and he had this look about him that screamed child predator. We were young, but we were definitely smart enough to realize he may have been after us because of our age. We never told our parents though, because they would have grounded us just for going out ding-dong ditching. It was just a disturbing memory we'd have to deal with. We were lucky we got away okay though.
My name is Nancy, and I work as a behavioral therapist in a local psychology office. I've been doing this for 5 years, and I've dealt with a lot of different types of people. I've had hundreds of clients now, and I used to think I've seen everything, but I didn't realize how wrong I was until I took in a young man named Peter as a client. Peter was 15 years old. Peter's father, Tom, would always come in with his son for our sessions. Tom believed his son was on the spectrum for autism, or any kind of social disorder, because all of his life he lacked friends and the ability to socialize with other people his age properly. What I would do at our therapy sessions is try to talk to Peter about things he enjoyed doing, things he wanted to do, and try to get him to open up about his personal life. But at first it was hard because he was very quiet and shy. I would ask Tom to leave the room occasionally to ask Peter some more personal questions about his family life and such, and it seems Peter opened up a bit more when his father wasn't in the room, but I always caught the vibe Tom preferred to stay in the room. I learned from Peter that his parents didn't get along at all. They would fight almost every night for as long as he could remember. He had no siblings or cousins, coming from a very small family. So one thing about me, I love the fall season and anything pumpkin. Pumpkin beers, pumpkin pie, pumpkin spice latte, I can't get enough. One therapy session talking about the freshly fall weather outside, Peter was telling me about how this was his favorite season, and I told him the same, largely because of my love for pumpkin flavored things. But later that night, when I was already in my robe getting ready for bed, there was a loud knocking at my front door. I never get knocks past 9 o'clock, so I was nervous when I went to check the window to see who was there. There wasn't anyone, but when I opened the door, I saw a mini pumpkin and a pumpkin flavored coffee creamer on the ground in front of my door. I knew this was no coincidence. Only a few hours ago, I told Peter about my obsession with pumpkin flavored things. When my attempted call to Thomas the next day didn't go through, I texted him a picture of the 2 items left by my door, and how inappropriate and uncomfortable it is for me to be followed home by a client. Tom texted back within 10 minutes saying that his son would never do something like that. He almost acted offended by my accusation. Momentarily, it got me wondering, what if it was just a gift from a neighbor or something? The week went by, and I wondered if I should terminate my relationship with Peter as a client, but I decided not to see how the next session would go. The following Monday, Peter and Tom came in like usual. Peter seemed to be acting as normal. By now, he seemed very happy to talk to me, but I thought I saw it for what it was now, that he may have thought he was attracted to me, being possibly the only woman to speak to him with respect in his life. During that session, I brought up the little gifts at my front door with a smile, not directly accusing him of leaving them, just hinting at what a coincidence it was, and I noticed Tom getting annoyed in the corner by my bringing it up. Peter acted shocked and agreed it was a huge coincidence. It was a truly bizarre situation, and I didn't know what to do. But if it happened again, I knew I'd have to terminate our relationship. 2 nights later, a knock at my door again while I was in the living room watching a movie. My heart sank because I already knew what I was expecting. I checked the window again, and no one was there. So I slowly opened the door and sighed out of disgust when I saw more pumpkin-flavored things on my stoop. This time a pumpkin pie, pumpkin Cheerios, and pumpkin Oreos. It was a little past 9 o'clock at this point. I got my cell phone and took a picture of the items once again and sent it to Tom. I was about to start typing out a text about why I could no longer see them, but I heard the ding of someone's phone receiving a text right to my left, in the bushes in front of my house. I started walking slowly over to it, saying Peter's name. I saw someone hiding in the bush as I got close enough, but it wasn't Peter. It was Tom. We looked each other in the eyes, and he said, "Hi Nancy, you look beautiful as always." And I screamed. I ran into my house and locked the door, seconds before he tried opening it and started banging on it. I screamed to leave me alone or I'd call the police. He apologized through the door and yelled he's leaving. I watched through the window as he left to his car and drove away. This explained not only the unwanted gifts at my door, but possibly the sound of my side gate closing in the middle of the night weeks prior to this. I have no idea how long he was stalking me at my house. My brother, who's a police officer, advised me not to even bother trying to get a restraining order because there wasn't any evidence that he meant me any harm, and it would just be he said, she said allegations. However, I did report the case to the police, and added that Peter may be in an unsafe, abusive household. I don't know what Tom's end goal was by following me home and leaving those things by my door. Based on the way he tried to open my door after I locked it though, says he wasn't trying to be a romantic type. I feel sorry for Peter. His dad brought him in to see me only as some kind of method of getting closer to me. It was a Friday night in early October a long time ago. I was with my 3 friends, Jose, Brian, and Tanya. We were being bored teenagers wanting something to do in the spirit of the season. It was a nice fall night out, low 60s, nice breeze, so we wanted to be outside. Not much goes on in our boring town, and we weren't old enough to go to bars or anything. We decided to ride our bikes up Miller's Road to this old closed-down pumpkin farm nicknamed Farmer John's Pumpkin Patch. It used to be a literal farm surrounded by crops on one side and forest on the other. The alleged Farmer John, or whoever actually owned it, didn't live there anymore. It was sold, and whoever bought the land just never did anything with it for a long time. It was a 20-minute bike ride up Miller's Road, which is an extremely quiet road traffic-wise. Just lots of cornfields and farms around this area. When we got there, we rode our bikes off the road onto the grass, all with our flashlights on. We leaned our bikes up against the old abandoned house that the owner used to live in. We walked around the overgrown grass a bit, checking out where the pumpkin patch used to be and where the animals in the little petting zoo area used to be. There's something really cool about exploring abandoned places at night, but also kind of spooky. We went back to the house where we left the bikes. Breaking into it was relatively easy since we weren't the first ones to do so. The door was already knocked off the hinges. All we had to do was kick it open. This is where it got really creepy though, being in an abandoned house at night. Even as a thrill seeker, it's a bit unnerving, even when you're 4 people. I'd say 5 minutes into being inside the house, we started to hear thumps from upstairs. Like periodic thumps, not just random thumps. Jose and I decided to head upstairs to check it out. Tanya didn't want to go upstairs because she was scared, so Brian stayed downstairs with her. When we got to the upstairs, the thumping was much louder for sure. It came from the left side of the stairs. Our flashlights revealed a bunch of doors up here, all open, leading into what were probably once all bedrooms. Our footsteps were loud as we walked closer to the room with the thumping. There was no way to hide it on these rickety, creaky floorboards. As we got to the corner room doorway, the thumping stopped. I whispered to Jose, "Is it an animal?" He went, "Shh." I pointed my flashlight into the room, starting from the left side, working the light to the right. I stopped when my flashlight landed on a male's figure in the corner of the room facing the wall, with what appeared to be blood on the wall in front of him, probably banging his head on it, creating those thumping sounds. Jose aimed his light at him too, and we both jumped back. We left in a hurry,
and as we ran down the stairs, a horrifying, gut-wrenching scream came from the room we were just in, causing all 4 of us to scream. As we left the house and got to our bikes, we heard stomping down the stairs from inside the house as the screaming got louder. We all ran to our bikes, absolutely freaked the fuck out, and we pedaled as fast as we could out of there. The screaming stopped before it ever came out of the house. We didn't look back. We continued pedaling all the way up Miller's Road till we got back to my house. I have no idea what we witnessed in there, and I won't even try to explain it. When I was a little kid, there was this top of the mountains resort I went to with my family 2 different times. The resort was shut down a long time ago, but I remember it for the most part to be a very nice, family-friendly place. Both times we went, it was in the fall because my mom wanted to go for the changing colors of the leaves. This story takes place the second time we went to the resort. I was, I think, 6 years old. My older brother Corey was around 10 and my little brother was around 4. My parents paid most attention to my little brother, of course, with the expectation that my older brother would be kind of watching out for me. On this particular night, they were doing the bonfire marshmallow roast and hayride. We had ridden the hayride already while the sun was going down. After that was the bonfire and mini fireworks show. At the bonfire, I met this man who started talking to me, asking me if I was having fun and if I'd been to the resort before. He said he was one of the owners. Then he gave me a little laser pointer toy, and I instantly trusted him because, you know, I was 6. The hayride driver announced that he was doing a final ride in the dark, and that he was going to drive down the big hill, which sounded exciting. My older brother suggested we do it. He made some friends at the resort, so I think he disappeared to go look for them to ride the hayride with us. In the meantime, I was still sitting by the bonfire. My dad was drinking beer with his other dad on the other side of the fire, and my mom was with my little brother roasting marshmallows. Eventually, I went to go ask my mom where Corey went, and she said he's going on the hayride and to hurry and get on before they left. So I hurried to the mini line of like 5 people waiting to get on, and when I was on, there were about 15 to 20 people on there, but I didn't see my brother. I sat on one of the haystacks anyway, waiting, as the truck started up, indicating it was about to leave. I saw that man from before climb into the truck with a woman behind him, and he came to sit next to me when he saw me. He asked where my family was, and I shrugged my shoulders. Speaking of that, my brother never got on the hayride. The woman sat next to him. She looked at me and smiled, and he said that's his wife. He asked if I still had that laser pointer, and I said yeah and showed it to him. He smiled. The whole time I spoke with the man, his wife next to him was looking at me, smiling. During the hayride, the 2 were basically talking to me the whole time. Then, when we were approaching the hill drop where the driver said he was going to floor it, the man next to me saw I was nervous. So when we drove down the hill, he grabbed my arms and lifted them in the air so as to do the no hands thing that people like to do on roller coasters. It actually made me laugh because the drop down was fun. The man asked me if I had been to the arcade of the resort yet, and when I shook my head no, he told me he had the key to a lot of the games, and asked if I wanted it. I of course shook my head yes. He said he'd just have to go get it and go there with me, and it would be all mine. We one by one left the back of the truck as we got back to the bonfire. The man and woman both walked alongside me, and the woman held my hand and kept calling me sweetie anytime she said something to me. The man said the arcade wasn't far. As we walked away from the brightness of the huge bonfire and into the darkness of the pathway back towards the cabins and main buildings of the resort, I heard Cody's voice call my name from behind. I turned, and it was Cody looking at us. I yelled back, "We're going to the arcade," and the man and woman looked back but didn't say anything. My brother didn't follow us or say anything else. After we got further from the bonfire, the woman's grip on my hand got tighter and we started walking faster. Something wasn't right because her grip was starting to hurt me. I also noticed we weren't going in the direction of the clubhouse. We were heading towards the parking lot. When I asked where we were going, the man said we're getting the key to the arcade games. Next thing I remember, my mom's panicked screaming voice was heard behind us, screaming let go of him. My mom was running over hysterical, and the 2 strangers stepped away from me, and I remember the woman saying some BS like they were taking me to the front desk area. My mom yelled and cursed at them, and the 2 of them just quickly walked away into the darkness. I wish my dad was with my mom at that moment to kick the man's ass. The worst part is they got to just drive off and potentially do this to somebody else. My mom asked everybody at the bonfire if they had seen those people. Nobody recognized them. She also reported this to the resort and the police. But really, what could they do once the couple disappeared? The idea that I was almost kidnapped by a creepy older couple when I was only 6 or 7 is stomach churning, even to this day.